All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Access Succeed. This is Gearface. I'm so excited to be joined once again by Andarel. Andarel, thank you so much for being here.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Of course, of course, of course. And today we are following up our lesson on completely fair and reasonable character Alice with completely fair and reasonable character Juno. Very, very excited to be learning a little bit about Juno. Don't know anything about her. I know that she's got, cool art relative to the Red Horizon crew. But yeah, I am a completely blank slate as always. I'm looking forward to being taught well by Anderel. A couple disclaimers before we get started. Number one, as always, we're going to be talking about playing to win on this show. Playing to win as Juno is a little bit complicated because, first of all, you'd have to time travel back to a time when season one was legal in competition. And also, even then, you might notice that in TTS, she's part of the banned characters list. Juno is, I understand, pretty good in Exceed.
Yeah,
Um,
she's good.
so you might not always have an opportunity to play her in tournament. If you do, maybe you can make use of our advice here. Please use Juno responsibly. Don't sick her on your unsuspecting opponent unless they know what they're in for. Be nice to your opponent. We're all in a community here. Um, if the lines of play are not fun to you, please play the way that you do find fun. You do not have to play to win in Exceed. You can play Exceed for fun. Disclaimer number two. We are going to be pretty prescriptive about strategy on this show. We're going to say a lot of always do this, never do that. Exceed, even for a character this old, is not a solved game. So remember to take all of that with a grain of salt. Anderel is a very good player, but his opinion is not a definitive, guide by any means. So please develop your own lines of play. Tell us why we're wrong about Juno. Tell us why she's actually bottom tier. I would love to hear from you. All that said, though, I am incredibly excited to learn a little bit about what this character has going for her. So please, Anderel, take it away. Tell me a little bit about Juno.
So yeah, Juno's a weird character. The initial sort of in the history of Exceed, right? There was season one, which came out. There were two promos, Juno and Everest, that came out along with pretty soon after the set came out. And
Mhm.
then there was one more, Super Skullman, who I don't know who's doing the tutorial on that, but you can play
That'll
them
be actually
online there.
D on Monday.
That makes sense.
We're getting Skullman.
But so Juno is from this IP called Esper X
Mhm.
or Esper Cross. I don't know. This is uses the anime notation of X can really mean anything
That can mean whatever you want it
and
to mean.
be pronounced however you want.
Yep.
But basically, there's one other character that never released in print. You may have heard of them if they float around, called Jamina, who's also from Esper. I think it's actually Esper Cross, but anyways, uh, who knows? So basically, they were from another IP that Level 99 was messing around with. As always, if an IP makes it into Exceed, the game is cursed to never come out.
True.
You can tell from the way it is, and so that's why her art style is so funky. I
Mhm.
do really like the art. I wish there was more in that vein. I'm not as sold on some of the other promo arts in season one, but this one's really good. And
Yeah,
so,
they're a very I even like the card frame. Like everything looks pretty good about this character.
yeah, so they're like a very pop inspired aesthetic. I
Mhm.
feel like stuff like maybe Hi-Fi Rush kind of lands in that. And so her kit has been sort of studied for a while. She's sort of the archetypical speedster in a lot of ways nowadays, and in ways that Alice really isn't. But the the thing about Juno was that she took a while to get banned. Alice was identified pretty early as a problem. The eyes in particular,
Yes.
where she could control your hand, were a huge problem. Juno doesn't really have anything like that, and Juno also has some very real issues that are more exploitable than Alice. She's super exceed reliant, takes a while to turn on, and her damage numbers are not great. You may notice a lot of ones and threes and some fours, and they're not like fake either. Like this three could be a five, but it's not really consistently a five. This three could be a nine, but like it's not really ever going to be.
Right.
So her numbers are like really not actually all that great, and so it took a while for her to get banned. And what ended up happening was that we had a tournament eventually called the Judo Invitational because she was putting up numbers for a while, and there were a couple of us playing her. I was I think the first like super aggressive Juno tournament player, where like I just played her like everything. But there were other players also running around who were pretty good, and we were putting up good numbers with her. And the problem is that Juno is just kind of draining to play against. She's a very neutral heavy character and plays very unfair neutral, which we'll get into. And so the problem with Juno is that if you don't like stomp her early and then win mix-ups, her end game is just so nuts that she will run you over. And so that just like she ended up being too consistent, and she just ended up being too hard for characters to play against. That she was banned for the health of the meta. The next tier down, the characters like Zoe and Mei and maybe Lily, never
Ulrich,
yeah, and
that sort
Ulrich
of those folks.
never like quite got banned, but I think going projecting into the future they might have. And
Okay,
Juno is like slightly above them, and then Alice is again like Alice has weaknesses, right? But Alice is when her game plan goes off, she's so absurdly overpowering
right,
that we kind of caught that really quickly.
right.
Juno's game plan's a little more fragile.
So
So
for people who haven't seen our Alice lesson, you mentioned the eyes, Soli Diabolic, Soli Divine. Those are boosts that are basically like super duper reading and super duper parry for people who don't know. And so as we get into this lesson, I shouldn't expect anything from Juno that makes me go like, that's literally unfair. The way that
I mean,
I
there's a
did
little bit of
occasionally.
that. Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but it's not like game breaking unfair. It's just like these numbers are really hard to play against, and well, you'll see. So we'll talk about her character ability because that's
Okay,
really where all the nonsense is.
sure.
So Juno's ability, and level 99's messed with this a little bit. I think who else has a little bit of this? Wagner, I think, messed with this a little bit, but basically she's a boost recursion character. So as an after, if your attack hit, you can bring a continuous boost back from your discard to play without paying its cost. Keep it and through the end of the strike, so into the next strike, and then seal it when it will be discarded. So this is a little funky, but basically what this means is, let's say I strike with assault, right?
Okay,
So I I activate, I hit with assault, and then after, let's say I want to pull back defend from my discard
okay,
because I want a free armor for the rest of the strike, or maybe not to get stunned. So this stays in play until the end of the strike. And then, even though, this goes to Gidge or whatever, this stays in play for one more strike.
okay.
It stays through into the next strike. And the reason for that is that, like, if I were to boost, for example, speed instead, it wouldn't really do anything. Like, getting speed on after is
On
kind of pointless.
an after effect, even power on an after effect
Yeah, it's not
wouldn't
great.
it wouldn't make assault hit for 6 or anything like that. It would just be there for the next strike.
Correct.
Okay.
And so what that means is that you're like whenever Juno strikes, she gets to set up for the next strike at the cost of sealing the boost when it gets discarded.
Okay.
So a couple things to think about with that. First things first, if you're on your reshuffle and you're not going to reshuffle your discard anyways, that downside is way less of a big deal. But if it's on
Okay.
the first reshuffle, that like can really hurt. Especially because your power numbers are not great. You like Juno will deck herself if she's too aggressive with her ability early,
Okay.
and that's a problem. That's like a real concern for her. The second thing is that the ability to like get action compression for free to set up for strikes during strikes is really good. And if you want to like win a strike, for example, being able to do something like advantage and then +2 speed and then strike with the advantage, or even if the opponent strikes into you, play like sweep and then boost something that's going to help you win the next strike, that's just really good. So, one of Juno's big strengths is that if you strike into her, like normally if you strike into somebody, you know that whatever the end of the strike is kind of where things are going to be on the next turn, right? Like if I play grasp and you're playing something, like I probably get grasp, maybe I get focused, but I probably get that positioning. Maybe you can strike into me, but you're not gonna have any boost down or anything. Like I kind of know what's coming, right?
Right.
In Exceed.
At the beginning, once the strike ends, we have the cleanup phase. Everything goes to gauge. Everything goes to discard pile. Our positions are set, and then you pass turn to me, and then the game continues. Maybe not from neutral, but there's nothing on the board at that point.
Yeah, and there's very few cards that mess with that. Like Sydney and Serena have a transform that messes with that, and there's like Platinum can mess with
Platinum,
that. Like
right, right.
Platinum has a lot of Juno's DNA, I think. But so what ends up happening is that this ability really messes with that part of the game where the game just gets like playing into Juno can be kind of unpredictable because her numbers can be very swingy. You can see she has a +3 speed boost and a +3 power boost and a bunch of movement boosts. So Juno is just kind of like a she's not defensive, right? Like this ability costs you're sealing your boost, so you're not just doing it to not get hit usually, and you need to have the right card in discard. But she can play a very like option select heavy, uh, sort of reliable game. Basically, yeah. So her ability, in theory, again, this is not how it played out in practice, but her ability is really just that she's sort of meant to sort of weave together multiple turns in a blurry way, where she strikes and then she gets a benefit next turn, and then she just plays less, doesn't have to play as much neutral because she can set up for strikes during strikes.
Right.
That's
Uh,
cool.
she can use her opponent's turns and her own turns to make whatever she wants
Exactly.
to do next stronger. Okay,
Her
okay.
her strike, they're strikes, not really her turns, but like she's
Fair. I see. Okay, sure.
the other thing that you'll notice about Juno is that Juno is fast, right? 7, 6, 6, 5, 9, 5. And a lot of these are pretty speedy. Like this card is a 6 that has recursion, kind of like Chip. This card is a 1 to 5 at speed 6, or I guess 2 to 5 at speed 6. This card is assault, right? This is a one of those dumb season 1 projectiles that hits 3 to 6
At
at
speed
speed
7 for some
7.
reason.
That's a niner, but again, it's a little committal. And then Meteor Jam is under curve as a treat, I guess, to the opponent because
Right.
you probably don't play Meteor Jam that much, but he does hit for 7. So, you do you. But just because she's so fast, it's kind of hard to set up into her. Any like really speed based things just might randomly fall apart because she's fast enough that if she gets happens to have an EX, you might just explode.
Right. So
So
even without her boosts in play, just her basic kit is tough to beat. It's just sort of like slightly too fast, slightly too able to deal with what her opponent's trying to do to her.
it's basically she's quite fast, and then she has a lot of sort of after option select things that help her get a little bit of movement. So like she has after move up to 1 here. There's a reason this is on an ultra. She's got like spike to throw a little bit of armor in, and then in general she can just throw a boost in and get value for next strike
Okay.
because she probably is going to go off. Like she's probably going to get her after just because she's fast. The main things to think about, she doesn't have a lot of defense, right? Like she's got 6 guard on Starstruck, and Starstruck is fine. It's a decent card, but it's not like anything super special. And then everything else, she's relying on speed to win, kind of like
Right.
Alice was.
Sure.
So she does rely a lot on that speed. Just because the way her kit is shaped, though, she's got more counterplay if you're trying to deal with that, though. So like I mentioned earlier, thing about Juno, that's kind of how she was meant to play, right? So she's meant to play as this speedster who weaves together strikes and gets a lot of value over time. Good boost kit, good neutral, just like pokes at you and tries to throw power on things until she gets to cash out.
Okay.
Then she exceeds. And this all goes just like throw it in the trash. This character is busted as hell. You're probably dead now. So her exceed is the same as her neutral, except it's before instead of after.
Oh no.
And this has some implications, and then it
Yes.
has some more implications. So
Okay.
the like simplest implications are things that start to work, or things start to work that didn't used to. Like plus power
Yep.
is real, plus speed is still not real. Like gaining speed on before is pointless unless you're the, fighting some weird custom character or
Yeah, there's
something.
there's occasionally there might be some incredibly bizarre situation that comes up that checks speed after reveal, but
But
for
yeah,
the most part, if you've got your before effect,
so
you've already gotten speed.
so the cards that it matters for are Comet Tail, where it matters a bit, Auto Tuner, where it matters enormously, Mix Break, where it doesn't really matter, Electric Slide, where it matters enormously, and Fierce. So it's
Right.
not that many cards, but it changed. That's so like in that sense, yes, it changes a lot, but the problem is that the cards that it matters for are the cards that she really, really needs. And also, she can do things now seeing like after seeing what the opponent is going to play and like choosing to adjust her game plan a bit more flexibly to the opponent.
Right.
So
So all of this is happening after reveal timing, so I can see, okay, and I've got a whole discard pile full of cards. I can see whether this +2 power is actually going to meaningfully matter to stun my opponent's attack after I see what the attack is.
yeah, so before, it was you needed to sort of commit a little bit, like you were committing the boost to the next strike, so you didn't really know what was going to happen.
Right.
Now you know immediately whether it's going to give you value,
Right.
and that's a
And
huge difference.
it's still going for the next strike anyway, so you're just like,
Yeah, of
cool.
course.
I still get to uh commit for later, but also my commitment is paying off before I even have to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's one thing. The other thing about this ability is simple math, right? In Exceed, you have 4 copies of each card. And if you go through your deck twice.
Right.
That means if you boost each card every time, you have 4 copies. With her ability, you can get 6 copies of your continuous boosts, right? Because you play the 4 copies, and then after it goes in the discard during your second reshuffle, you return it to play and get it for a second use.
Right.
Does that make sense? So it's
Yeah.
like 4 plus 2 extra uses.
Right, sure.
Anything that you use after your Exceed mode, you now have instead of 6 copies, it's 8 copies because the boost happens twice.
Oh, it happens during the strike that you use it, and then it happens
And
again
then the next
afterward.
strike. So if I play
Okay.
Fierce, my deck has the first Fierce, the second Fierce, the Fierce on the turn I recur it, and the Fierce on the next strike.
Right.
So each of my Fierces can be used up to 4 times. And more importantly, each of my auto tuners can be used up to 4 times. So the fact that her numbers are pretty weak, 8 auto tuners is 24 power, 8 fierce is 16 power.
That's
So
that with if you put those numbers on a 0 power card, you've killed your opponent.
yeah, so that goes a long way in terms of mitigating the fact that she just has trouble killing.
Okay.
And the other thing is that it's not like you don't have these cards, right? Like you played them from your discard, which means if you hit with Technic Burst and then spend the gauge, it goes into your discard, and then pull back Auto Tuner, you're getting like triple value out of this card, right?
Right. So
So
so the,
that's what makes her so silly.
so the part later in this lesson when we go through all of these cards, and I do the thing that I do where I ask, okay, well, so Comet Tail is really good, but how do you feel about Comet Chaser as a boost relative to Comet Tail? That conversation matters way less for Juno because she gets both of everything.
Almost everything. There's
I
two non-continuous
Oh,
boosts that
you're
she
right.
doesn't get.
Okay, yeah, she does have it because it's not doesn't work for instant boosts. But my job of evaluating boost versus attacks as Juno, as the person playing Juno, and also as the person running and facilitating this lesson, or this video, uh, my the job of the Juno player is basically why not both for as many of my cards as I can make it be
Yeah,
relevant for. Okay,
exactly.
okay,
And so you want to exceed as fast as possible. You want to basically not use your ability until you're in that situation where you've got ideally a reshuffle if it's a sensible time. You don't want to like early reshuffle just to get an extra one, but you
right,
you might. Um, and then you want to land as many of those boosts as possible. And the other thing that I mentioned, if you think this was in the Milia lesson, so this is probably that'll have been released by now. Actually,
yeah,
it's already
it's
been
already
released.
out. Yep, yep, yep.
Is we talk about cards being like good boost delivery methods, right?
Oh yeah, sure. Anything above curve, any Bad Moon is the example that you used a lot for Milia. That like ignore
Yeah,
armor above curve sounds great.
Bad Moon and Iron Savior. Like
Yeah,
if it's reliable and likely to hit, it's a good boost delivery method.
right.
And if you look at these shapes, these are very likely to hit.
So even if you're not hitting a crucial breakpoint with Sonic Comet, you are delivering the value of Auto Tuner basically every single time you play Sonic Comet, no matter what, because
Yeah, it's
it's
gonna
gonna
hit.
land.
Like so if I throw Auto Tuner onto Sonic Comet without taking an action, that's a 3 to 6 4 7, and I gain advantage.
Right.
Right? That's very silly. But the thing that's so good about that is that if this goes well, if I play Sonic Comet at range and I'm exceeded and this is in my discard, I just say, okay, if you played a thing that dodges or that means I don't have a good setup, I just don't pop Auto Tuner. I
Right.
might maybe pop, Comet Chaser
Right.
instead,
Or you use nothing. Right.
or I just use
This is a
nothing.
meh.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is that Juno has this situation where she's looking for opportunities to sort of play little mini combos because if she can get her boost to hit twice, your your life bar just goes away.
Okay.
And so what she really wants is to not fall too far behind early because her cards don't hit that hard and she doesn't really want to be using her ability until she's exceeded. And then flip the exceed mode and just outvalue you as quickly as possible. So,
Okay,
all right.
so you're really conservative early, you're building gauge, you're trying not to engage with your opponent, you're trying to survive, and then exceed mode, you just start rushing them down.
Basically, I mean, you can play value exceed, and you basically you don't care about killing them as fast as possible. You care about killing them as safely as possible. You're kind of like Zolt.
Okay,
Your job is not to win in like a crushing barrage of strikes before your resources run out. You have you're boosting for free every turn,
right,
basically every strike.
right.
So you can sit back, prepare, strike, probably be above curve, get boosts, win the strike, and then be ready to win the next strike and be fine. You
And
don't have to play aggressive.
and you're not committing that much to any of these strikes. You're not uh you aren't throwing these devastating haymaker mix-ups that if your opponent guesses right, you're just doing like thing that's probably going to hit and probably going to deliver value and you'll get a lot of value out of it. And by the end of the game, when we tally up our goodness points, you have done more goodness points than your opponent has.
Yeah, I mean the scary mix-up for Juno is if she strikes at range 3, is it, something like Comet Tail, is it like Spike? Is it Rhythm Beat? Is it Assault? But the scary thing about Assault at range 3 for a lot of characters is Assault at range 3 is a good card, right? We all know that.
Yeah.
Assault at range 3 with Auto Tuner in your discard is a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, that stun sweep on curve. If they play sweep, if they don't play sweep, you're like, I don't even need it. It's like a boost you didn't play.
Exactly. And just
Okay.
just having it in your discard is game changing. Assault at range 2, for reasons we'll get into, is also super scary with Juno. And so yeah, let's talk about cards.
Okay. Yeah.
So the main thing about Juno, she's fast. She's doesn't hit very hard unless she throws boosts on it. She's got weird recursion that is honestly not all that great, and she's got a bunch of little minor positioning that is fine, I guess. It's not really that notable. So Sonic Comet, this card's really good. It's kind of exactly what it says on the tin. You've seen Carl Swangi, I assume at this
Oh
point,
yeah.
or other.
The coffee cup.
Yeah, Coffee Cup is just a worse Sonic Comet, sort of. But they still do the same thing of you can, and one of the reasons that honestly she got banned in the end is that you can open double Sonic Comet and just get 2 gauge really quick, and it's
Oh
unless
right,
they have a slow projectile, there's not a lot they can do about that,
right.
or a guardy projectile
Th-
because
that
you just
that that actually sort of leads into a question I was going to have, which is that like 3 gauges on some characters a lot to exceed with. Um, because Juno's so above curve, am I getting my exceed mode most of the time fairly early in the game?
it's probably gonna take 3 to 4 strikes.
Okay.
You hit a lot.
Right, sure. It's not, I'm rushing it. I probably don't use my gauge for anything else until I've exceeded. So that means
Absolutely not.
right. So that means that as we're going through and evaluating all of these cards, um, I should be considering the possibility of Sonic Comet at any point after strike 3 or 4 in the game as potentially having access to my exceed ability from the jump. Like it's not that hard to get the stuff that's going to make these cards or the
Exactly.
rather that's going to make these boosts crazy.
It's probably gonna get you're probably gonna exceed really, really quickly, and when she doesn't exceed quickly, it's usually because the opponent has, like, an auto dodge or some kind of hard stop effect.
Right.
For example, we found that in playtesting way back in season 2, Lucia actually had an okay matchup because she can be kind of explosive, and she's fast, and she has, the auto dodge that
Right.
beats Sonic Comet at starting position,
Right.
and Chip probably does well for the same reason. He also probably does okay against Alice for the same reason. Like those very defensive, fast, evasive, like get out of your ideal ranges characters
Right.
tend to slow you down a little, but you're still a steamroller, right? You still hit them hard
Okay.
once you get going.
So
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 yeah, so Sonic Comet,
in
you're
the
like you just
in the early game, this is just a gauge builder.
it also will stun out fast projectiles. Stuns out dives. It's a gauge builder, but it's also a very scary defensive tool against some characters because if you're if they're like committing to anything that is speed based at range, it's probably going to be speed 5 to 6.
Right.
And just having this as a possible option, this outspeeds Ryu Hadoken.
Yeah. Wow, it
It's
does.
it's just like if he's worried about something like that, you literally just chuck a
It,
baseball in his
the,
face.
the number of other characters. So Ryu is my default training dummy for this series. He shows up in every video pretty much. The number of characters that I've talked about on this show that uh have said, yeah, so when you're at range, oh, actually not against Ryu, this is a bad example, and because I've picked the wrong training dummy. The number of things that Ryu's Hadoken shuts down at range, it has come up in like every single episode I've done. So an even faster one is something to be afraid of on defense.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's one power, so it's not gonna make miracles happen here.
Right. Can't stun
But
EXs, can't stun anything with guard.
yeah, and so the thing about Juno that you have to think about if you're playing against her, and this is going to come up a lot, is that the way to beat her is you force as many trades as you can early, because without her exceed mode and without a couple of specific loops, she's not that scary because she's probably not boosting much. Like maybe she is, maybe she's not. It's fine. If you like if I have 8 copies of a card and I play it once, I have 7 copies of a card. If I play it twice, I have 6 copies of a card.
Right.
So her card boosts are pretty good and her attacks are fine, which means she's gonna tend to boost. And like this is not a card that you will be super threatened by at close to mid range, right? It's like at range 3, this is a whatever.
Right.
It's mostly just a counter attacker and a fast poke that gives you advantage and free gauge. So if you're someone like Imogene or Umina, or if you have like Ryu Tatsu or Chun Spinning Bird Kick, I think has armor,
Yep.
or any slow projectile with armor or guard, like this card is way less scary because it trades super poorly,
Right. Yeah. So
but it's
people
still good to
can
have.
deal with this.
Yeah, and then you're gonna see that trend a lot with her, like until. And that stops being true once this has 4 power, right? Like
Sure.
if I throw a 3 to 6 4/7, it crushes a lot of those light armors, especially if I can option select into Comet Chaser or Mixed Break, for example, because I can just get evasion instead of power if I
Right.
need to
Right.
dodge.
If they do throw that low tiger shot or whatever, and you're not hitting 6 power or 7 power, however much you need to break low tiger shot to beat it, you're like, awesome. I just move in under the range shadow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, Sonic Comet, like it's good. It's way better in Exceed mode, like all her other cards. It's a good tool to have. It's not going to make miracles happen, but it's nice and it can be really annoying.
Right.
BPM Razor, I think this card is a little self-explanatory.
+3 speed is +3 speed. +2 speed
Yeah,
is
there's
already
not a
good.
lot. Interestingly, there's not actually all that much +3 speed in Exceed. You'll
There's a
if
few
you
+4 speeds. There's not many
Yeah,
in.
so Swift Destruction is a classic.
Yep.
That usually shows up on a Ultra and costs one force on an Ultra.
Right.
So having one fewer speed for one less force essentially is not that weird, but like +3 speed's really rare.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
kind of funny. The only +3 speed that I can think of is Akuma's Instant Hell Murder, and that boost is insane. I
But
don't think
part of
there's
that
any.
is because Akuma is so dying for ways to confirm his crazy power numbers.
Yeah, that's true. She doesn't really have that same issue.
Right.
But just like +3 speed is not that different from +4 speed. I mean, turning Spike into speed 6 instead of 7 is like not going to materially change much of anything.
Right.
Turning Dive into 7 instead of 8 is not going to materially change much of anything. Your fasts are already going to outspeed everything. Like, but this boost is really good. It does cost a force, sort of, and that's fine. You play this boost. you're never sad about it, and you probably spike them, or dive them. But long story short, this boost is great. It's also great with your exceed mode because you get to see what's going to happen afterwards. But honestly, it's the same with your normal mode if in practice
Right.
because
This is one of
it's
the
not like you
few
can be
that really
faster.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, that and sweeps plus 2 speed.
Right.
So yeah, so you're never going to go wrong boosting BPM Razor because like what are they going to do? Out boost you? They probably don't have that boost.
Right.
They have to play something defensive.
So
So yeah, it's good.
so when I am evaluating, obviously I just got done with a diatribe about how I don't get to ask this question about like is it Sonic Comet or is it BPM Razor? Which one do you use? Because I'm Juno, I'm going to use both. But one difference that does matter is if I boost BPM Razor and then strike, it's going to my discard pile, and I can use it with my Exceed mode fairly quickly then because it's in where I want to recur it from.
Right.
If I hit with Sonic Comet and it goes to Gauge, I need to at least take a turn to do something to get it into my discard pile before I get this boost back. How important a consideration is that for Juno? Like, should I be really worried about things that go in my gauge if they have really important boosts on them?
I mean, you're going to exceed, so that'll put 3 in your discard. Your ultras are both playable, so that'll put 2, like put a couple more in your discard. And remember, the cost goes in at the start of the strike, so you can spend cards that you like
Oh my
on your
god! So
ultras
yeah, you
if
could
you
do it
want.
on your Ultra.
And changing cards and moving are both perfectly reasonable. So yeah, I'm not that concerned about it. It's certainly not. It's certainly a consideration, right?
Okay,
It's not a bad thing to be worried about. But I would say it's like in the middle of your priority list.
okay.
If you have a good opportunity to play Sonic Comet, specifically, they don't just have a long range Guardy card. Just play Sonic Comet. If
I
they do, and you're threatened by it, think a little harder and maybe boost it.
right. But in that situation, I'm not like sweating bullets, being like, oh man, but I've got to get BPM Razor into my discard pile right now. If I'm in a good position to play Sonic Comet, just do it.
Yeah, just do it. You
Okay,
you
cool.
also have plenty of other cards, like speed in particular. Like it's nice. It's not going to kill you.
Okay.
So Comet Tail, this card is sort of the obvious mix-up with Sonic Comet because it closes you in at absurd speed and gets a card on hit. It's much less safe, right? Because running at the opponent tends to open you up to a lot more different counterattacks.
Right.
But it has one more power as a reward. That's still pretty pathetic, to be honest.
Yeah, still
In
can't stun
general,
EX attacks.
Um, in general, like it's a nice to have as a mix up. It's good if you can throw power on it. You play it. Even if you like use it to evade something, it's still not the end of the world. Like if you double whiff, it's not that big of a deal. But if you can hit it, great. The main thing about this card is that losing to this card on defense is super annoying. Or on their offense, if they strike into you and you win a strike with Comet Tail, for example, they try to like play an on curve assault or play an on curve play a dive either on curve or at range where it crosses up.
Right.
You closed in, poked him for a little bit at like stupid speed, drew a card, got to do some boost shenanigans, and now you're striking at probably a pretty good range for you. Like you like that those close ranges because throwing your ability on normals is really good. Normals are much better than your character cards usually.
Okay. So and all these boosts, like normals are built around uh their normal boosts, right? All these cards are work in part in the engine of Exceed because of these boosts on them being reasonable with these cards on them. But maybe not when I have 8 of them. And maybe not when I have these boosts.
Well, the other thing about normals is that normals are meant to be sort of like self-sustaining, right? Like they are this own built-in mix-up, and where normals tend to be pretty good, right?
Sure.
It's rare to have specials that are that much better than normals, and usually normals tend to give you what you want at their good ranges. And because Juno specials don't do that, because they tend to be aggressively fine, and her ability just buffs any card regardless of what card you're choosing to throw your boosts on.
Right.
Throwing good boosts on normals is just known to be really good, and that's no different with Juno.
Sure. I mean the cards that we named for BPM Razor as being particularly strong were Spike and Dive.
Yeah,
those are our payout cards.
the only like notable other BPM raisers, like Meteor Jam is a good BPM raise because it's 278,
Right.
and Starstruck is fine because it probably stuns things or gets a better range one option. Still sort of loses to Grasp, sort of, but long story short, you're getting a lot of value just throwing boosts on normals,
On
so
normals,
you're gonna
sure.
do that.
Okay, okay.
So yeah, Comet Tail, like it's kind of self-explanatory. It's a good defensive card. It's a fine aggressive card. It's probably you don't really play it being worried about cross that much, like in terms of defensive speed sixes. Like sometimes you have to worry about cross, but
Right.
this is not really a range 2 card. It's more of a range whatever the hell you want that's not 1
Yeah,
card.
it's a 2 to 5. It's basically it's a super dive.
Yeah, this is the kind of shape that like popped up a bunch in season 6, but this still hits. Those season 6 ones are after, so
Right.
really best of both worlds type situation. So yeah, again, like this is gonna be a trend with her. It's hard to really hype up her cards all that much because she's not really about individual spikiness. She's
Right.
about sort of how everything interacts.
Her power is coming from this.
Yeah, and just the like unique combinations of things.
Right.
So Comet Chaser, this card, a lot of people read this card as hit advance as far as possible. That is not what it says. This is hit, go wherever you want, like go forward as much as you want, but like
Right.
choose anywhere,
Right.
which is a very good evasive ability. Uh, that BattleCon has those a bit. Exceed, not I don't think any other card in Exceed has that specifically. Kind of like Sword and Cross on Alice is a little similar from as a like sheer amount of positioning, but there's really not a lot much else.
Yeah, there's
And
a
so,
couple that do say like advance as far as possible or retreat as far as possible, but having flexible positioning with that range
yeah,
band
super rare.
is pretty crazy.
So this is her other sub theme that like kind of like I mentioned with Alice, like some of these characters have a theme and then a sub theme,
Yeah.
and so her sub theme is that like flexible is like positioning boosts basically, or like micro positioning.
Okay.
And this is basically the best of them because if you land this, it's kind of hard to get hit, right? If there's a lot of options of spaces that you can advance into, they probably can't cover all of those unless you're talking like literally inevitability or they're near a corner and they can sweep everything or something.
Right. Right.
It's
Or
it's just hard.
they have a whole bunch of range bands down and there's nowhere for you to go under or range boosts down and there's nowhere for you to go behind them. But like, yeah, if you're cornered, you grasp them, you play anything fast, and you're done. Like they cannot hit you.
It is also worth noting that this is a hit effect and
Right.
not an after, which means that you can arrange it with other hit effects appropriately. That usually doesn't matter that much. So, for example, for Rhythm Beat, I could push them and then move, or I could move and then push. For Starstruck, I could like move next to them and then Starstruck them. That's usually not going to matter that much, to be honest. For Juno Live, who cares? The hit effect doesn't matter. The card where this really actually matters for is Grasp, because I can reposition them to maybe switch sides, or I can move forward and then grasp them
Oh,
forward or back.
so
It leads to
if we
comedy.
if we did so when you said if we were in this position, I cannot advance anywhere behind Ryu. So if he did play, like if he played sweep here, I actually might have some difficulty getting out of the way, depending on some cards. But if I grasp the sweep, now you're here and now I advance.
Yeah,
I get you.
that works. The other thing that's similar is in this situation, it also might seem like you lose to sweep, and even if I grasp him here, he still does everything.
Right.
But I can go hit advance 2, grasp push 2,
And then
and that
push.
works too.
Right. Right. Because you don't need to be right next to them to push.
Yeah.
So you move yourself first. Interesting. Okay. So
So
crazy flexible positioning on this.
yes, extremely good. You also, if you get it twice, that often means that what ends up happening is, and a lot of characters can't really deal with this. Let's say I throw, I don't know, Starstruck here. Starstruck is pretty good. So I Starstruck, I push 3, I advance to the other side. They probably miss. I strike again on my next turn potentially, or if they do something. My next strike, I still have Comet Chaser up, and it's very possible that I just get a Sonic Comet for free if I've made range,
Right.
and I still have Comet Chaser up. So now they have to deal with Sonic Comet, where I can literally advance anywhere at speed 7.
And gain advantage and get a gauge and deny them resources, all of that stuff. So
And
like
possibly get power, because remember, I get my ability every strike. So you can theoretically have 2 boosts running at the same time if you keep chaining them,
right.
because it's strike N -1 and strike N.
Yeah. So this one would be on the way out. Uh it's about to be sealed, but while it's still up, I get fierce, and now I've got both for a second before this one leaves.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah,
Um
that's where Juno starts going nuts.
so just the compounding value of all of these boosts together. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually really really scary. Um and I assume that excuse me. I assume then that like obviously I'm probably gonna if I'm crushing on tools like this, I'm probably gonna have fairly good neutral. But I'm assuming that if the early parts of my game plan are to build gauge safely, boosts like this are going to be very valuable to me because this makes me very safe against a whole lot of things.
Yeah, it's a good play. I mean, Comet Tail probably gets you a gauge, so you have to weigh it against that. And if you're always striking at pretty much above or on curve, your spikes are pretty scary if you do want to play the mix up, because what's they might just say, "Hey, I'm gonna try and assault or something to beat the spike, because if I guess wrong, I only take 2 damage."
Right.
Right? And 2 damage is way less important to her than the gauge, but it's still 2 damage as opposed to 4 or
Five,
5 or
five.
6.
Right. Sure. Sure. Sure.
So yeah, so if you want to play this route, go for it. It's certainly going to be good, but if you're doing that, you probably need to play this card as a boost. And I mean, this is a first world problem, but she's not that action compression-y outside of her ability. You might not actually want to spend that many turns boosting instead of striking or playing other or doing other stuff.
Interesting. Okay. So all that stuff that I said a second ago about like it's probably more important to you to get a card into your discard pile immediately so you can boost it later. I'm actually sort of thinking about it wrong then, because the act of boosting it, unless it's going to help me in the moment, is a tempo loss now in exchange for a tempo gain later.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
maybe I should be hitting with these cards in order to get them engaged, in order to get them in discard, while maintaining tempo rather than getting them directly in discard.
Yep, and that's a choice. I mean, it's different for BPM Razor than for Comet Chaser, because BPM Razor,
It's
it's a
it's
little different. So this
it,
card enables you, like, gives you more mix up and basically guarantees that you get gauge pretty safely because of things like dive and spike.
right.
They have to like really hard play around this. This card is still good, but it's a little more situational because it gives them more counterplay.
Right. There's no stat on this. It's just a lot of positioning flexibility.
Yeah, so it's still really good, and it's still, if they can't really deal with your stuff, because your cards even without Comet Tail are still fast and good,
Right.
but yeah, it's not as much of a guaranteed like, let's just do this.
Okay.
So yeah, that's Comet Tail. These 2 cards are like your fast pokes, especially early game. Technic Beat is a weird card. So this card looks fine, and it's aggressively fine. It's recursion. It adds the bottom card of your discard pile to your gauge, which, if that's not a continuous boost, then like, who cares, right? And honestly, if it's in your gauge, it's going to go back into your discard anyways.
Right. Sure.
This has a couple of weird effects. So the first and most notable effect of this card is that this is an after, right? Unlike a hit effect like the Ryudokens, this works like Chip Sensei. No, what's the name of that card that Chip has? Chip basically has this card, but worse. Nakanrozan Resho. So Chip's Resho, which is like after you can gain advantage or return this to your hand. So what this means is that if someone is just trying to, neutral strike, like whiff a card to make her miss and make her spend cards, she can always basically, quote unquote, win a double whiffed strike by playing Technic Beat, right? Because you close one, which probably gets you to a better position because she's not really a lot of ranger. It gets you a free gauge, and it returns it to your hand.
Right.
So that part is great. As an actual strike, this card is pathetic. Hits for 3 on curve with no other effects really.
What if cross didn't let you dodge anything?
Yeah, I mean, it might dodge a projectile by closing 1, which is fine, and
Right.
it does potentially recur itself regardless, so you may want to get the recursion, but those are it's not a great stat line for minor bonuses. It does get scarier with stats, and it is on curve, so, go for it. Recurring
It's
this is also kind of awkward because you want this in your discard ASAP to start threatening Autotuner.
right. Okay, so
So,
the fact
yeah.
that it you then you'd want to boost auto tuner, but you just got done saying that you would rather probably boost from discard as often as you can. Um, I'm also noticing so the after effect is worded kind of interestingly. Close one space if you moved, you may return this card to your hand. So I only get this. So if I'm at range one, uh, I chest bump and therefore do not move. So I don't get this at range one. Um, if I for whatever reason had Comet Chaser in play, the hit effects movement does that key the after effect, or does it have to be
No.
part of the after effects movement?
The after works like dive. All effects basically refer to themselves unless they say otherwise.
Right. Okay.
So you could just go one further. Like I could move to here instead of here if I wanted to end
Right.
up at
Oh,
range
sure.
1,
And
and that would be
then you're
fine.
after. Okay, I get you. But it would have said if you moved during this strike.
Exactly.
If
Exactly.
it was allowed to refer to Comet Chaser. Okay. But in kind of regardless, it sounds like I'm mostly using this as uh, a tool to build gauge at range, um, and a bad attack.
Yeah, it's fine, I guess. It is an on curve button, but that's like not anything notable. It does move. It's on curve and it moves you, and it's relatively quick. So that's maybe a thing to have, but you have better cards for that. The other thing that's notable is that because it's a fast closes can be pretty dangerous, especially if you're trying to double whiff. Because if you're trying to double whiff, you want slow close, right? Because
Sure.
then the opponent goes, you out slow them, they whiff, you move in, and everything's fine. Fast closes, you might get swept or tatsued or accidentally walk into something.
Right.
So,
And it
that's a real concern.
it might be awesome to build a gauge for nothing on a sort of nullified strike where no one really gets anything but you get something. But if you're running into sweep for it,
Yeah,
that
that's
gauge was
bad.
not worth it.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a weird card. It's not great. It's not bad. It just kind of exists, and it's nice when it's nice, and it's pretty sad when it's not.
Right. Okay.
Auto Tuner though, Auto Tuner is a card or the boost. So +3 power is exceptional. Similar to how +3 speed's not super common, +3 power is also not super common. Uh, this was rehashed in Shovel Knight, promo night, and it was turned out that they were both really good, and
Yep.
that stays here. Basically, anything that you give 3 power to hits like a truck. We've talked about that with several characters, and it does cost a force, and her economy is pretty sad, but you'll pay it for 3 power. The thing about Autotuner is you kind of have to hit. If you're playing Autotuner, you really are going to play a card like Sonic Comet or Comet Tail or maybe Rhythm Beat or like Die or like Assault
Or an EX attack. Like you need to
or an
confirm this.
EX. Yeah, you really want to confirm Autotuner,
Okay.
and so you have to work around that a little bit. But this is the main. If you're going to play something scary before you exceed, this is one of very few cards to do that. It's
Okay,
also
so
like
so
probably worth teching for the opponent because this is your biggest chunk of power.
okay. And
Just as a head,
and
like as a thing, you lose by running out of power, and teching a 3 power card is pretty nice.
and the way that your character ability is phrased, when it would be discarded from play, that includes if your opponent techs it. You still seal it even then.
Correct.
Okay, okay. So that's incredibly bad for you. So when you say this is one of the few that you would use even before your exceed mode, do you mean like hard casting, hard boosting this from hand, or
Yeah,
do you
hard boosting
mean
it. Hard
or do you
boosting
mean
it.
from your character ability with and then
I would
sealing it?
probably, I'd probably not boost it with my character ability prior to exceeding, because I really want to get it twice. Unless I think I'm just gonna like win the game off that. But honestly, if I'm winning before flipping, I'm already so
Yeah,
far ahead
yeah.
that things have
Things
gone
have
horribly
gone
wrong.
incredibly well for you and very very badly for your opponent. Then
So
okay,
so I may hardcast this prior to flipping. I probably don't use my ability on it,
right.
and Yeah, my ability is it's not blank. There's still cards, especially speed cards, that I'm not super upset about using prior to flipping. But it's a little bit of a more of a tough sell for auto tuner specifically. I
Right.
might boost fierce if I think I can really threaten a mix up, but again, I'm not super happy about it. If I'm unflipped and haven't reshuffled yet, which is pretty common, that's
Sure, because
even more annoying.
if you haven't flipped, it's probably because it's the early game. Why have you reshuffled already?
Yeah, so it's a concern, and it's this is gonna make more sense when we get to her ultras, to be honest.
Okay.
So let's just keep
Yeah,
rolling.
let's keep going.
So rhythm beat. It's a weird assault like instead of advantage because it's got the same stats and abilities. Instead of advantage, it gives you a little push and possible recursion. That's honestly more useful in some ways. It does require hitting, so meh, and it doesn't work against focus. But recurring rhythm beat is actually kind of nice because this boost is really notable, and this boost is not continuous. So
Oh, okay. You
you
actually
have to
might want
choose.
to, yeah. So that question I asked earlier, this is one of the ones where it actually is a choice between them, but not really because it's recurable.
Yeah, so if you land rhythm beat, it's aggressively fine. It's 4 power, you get back rhythm beat. And rhythm beat's boost is really good, but you could have just boosted rhythm beat and not risked eating sweep or focus.
Right.
So if I'm already exceeded, then this looks a little different because maybe I want to play this with +3 speed or +2 speed or plus power or something. And then I do just want more copies of assault to whack them for reasonable power at
Sure.
good speed or vice
It's
versa.
it's a solid boost delivery mechanism, especially as an EX, right? Like you
Yeah.
above curve, on curve, stuff like that.
Yeah. EX runs into the problem with drop the mic being spent, but yeah. So this card really is defined by its boost. So its boost is bizarre. Other copies of this boost exist, but they're kind of rare. So drop the mic is look at the top 7 cards of your deck and keep one, discard the rest.
Right.
Other cards like this exist. None of them are this extreme. Byakuya has his. It's not called Hecaton Shares.
Chalicerata, I think it's called.
Celcerata.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
was some long foreign word.
Yeah, that one's
That gets you a
that's
ton
like
of cards.
it's like draw 7, but because you'll draw for end of turn, you can't not uh go over your hand size.
Yeah, and it also costs you 3 force. So basically, you
Yeah,
pitch your hand and get a huge hand, and then spend another card force.
right.
There's also Plague Knight, I believe, has a do some widgets. He's got Bait Bomb, which is draw look at the top 3, add one to hand, one to
Oh, one to
gauge, spend a
gauge. That's
force.
right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the then there's Arakune has a one that's actually closer to this. His Forbidden Knowledge, where you look at the top 5, put one face down, put one to gauge, one to overdrive, and put back the other ones,
Right.
and then draw one of them. So it's like one face down, one to gauge, one to overdrive, one to hand, one to
One to
deck is
hand.
what it
Yeah,
actually ends up being because you draw it
yeah.
at the end of turn. So those are all they just sort of move cards around. This doesn't move cards around. This just dumps them right in the trash.
But
So
you might want them there.
well, that's the thing, right? So you're milling yourself for 7, which is always a little concerning. But once you're exceeded, you really want to have cards in your discard. So the best time to play this card is probably turn 1 or really early in the game when you can sort of play around what you milled and you're not hey, my options are low and I sort of are more likely to hit a card I don't want, which is
Right.
entirely that's nonsense, right? You'll always milling is random regardless. You don't ever actually have control over what this is going to mill. It's just going to be what's left in your deck, 7 of what's left in your deck.
Right.
But in theory, having more time to play around that is nice, and you do give up information to the opponent, which is always a problem with characters that tend to burn their deck quickly. But I mean, information is a fair exchange for plus a bunch of stats. So it's a
It,
great boost. It gets you your best. You're never going to actually lose all 7 because you get to keep the best one, and you get to draw another card afterwards. So replace it
so
it's
so the
it's yeah. Go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, so the sort of loss case for this boost then is if I am forced to if I'm at range 3 and I drop every single on curve range free option that I have into my discard pile because I had no choice to. And my opponent on their turn strikes into me and they know that now they control the mix up. If I can survive that one strike, honestly, even at the end, if I can survive to my after trigger, I'm probably uh winning on value by playing this boost because
Yeah, I
I will
mean,
get my character ability.
like, to be real, the real lost case is you hit both Technic Beaks and both Meteor Jams, and you just cry. Then you're
Right.
like, "Dear God, my that those 8 copies now went down to 7 and or 6 and now, like, my deck is super awkward." And so, you run the every time you do play Drop the Mic, you run the risk of hitting multiples of your key boosts because you do want to be able to threaten them from hand, right? That's not
Yeah, because that's two of your uses of the boost or four of your uses of the boost.
yeah, so you have to be careful. You probably don't boost Drop the Mic more than once per cycle. You're happy to boost it once per cycle early, and cycle meaning like reshuffle cycle.
Yeah,
Once per cycle early, just to get things in your discard. But getting too much in your discard is actively pretty poor.
because you're not if you've already got stuff in your discard, like how many turns is the game going to last? You're not going to boost every single card there.
And also, like, you're Juno. You're not usually digging for like super specific counterplay cards. Your cards are
Mm,
kind of samey.
okay,
You don't have that silver bullet that you're looking for. Maybe you do want to you say, hey, I need Technic Beat in my discard right now, or hey, I need Electric Slide in my discard right now, or like, hey, I need Mix Break in my discard right now. But you run the risk of getting too much of what you asked for.
sure,
Once
okay,
once you're exceeded again, like a little more flexible because your discard is just a better place to play cards from, and you do get a good attack to pair it with. But realistically, you're probably pulling like a good normal to strike with, and then dumping good boosts into your discard is what you're hoping for.
sure, okay,
So it's a key player. You probably want to play it at the right time, which means that like you might just strike with this to get it back because it isn't assault like. And long story short, Rhythm Beat's pretty nice. It's not going to be a showstopper or a card the opponent super has to play around. You play around the same way as Assault, but you're not sad if it hits, right?
yeah. And overall, it sounds like the sort of Andarel brand of or seal of approval on Rhythm Beat is a little bit hardier than it is on Technic Beat. Like this is just a better attack. It sounds like than our its
It's slightly
cousin.
better. The four power is a real benefit for her because she wants to get your health low because then she can just explode you.
Right, and
And
she has three
or
power. 4 plus 3 is 7. That's a big break point.
like okay, this so what are your lost cases, right? Your lost cases are you played this below curve and you ate cross. That's pretty bad, but also they're really assuming you're not going to play Technic Beat or Comet Tail or cross right at
Right,
that point. So they
right,
they played something brave. You trade into sweep or focus, and then you're trading better than Technic Beat, right? You're hitting 4 to 6 instead of 4 against 6 instead of 3 against 6.
right.
So you're doing better there. If you trade into focus specifically, you're kind of sad because you don't get the push, but it's still not like great, but it's still better than getting three. Like I would maybe take that over losing one delta. To be honest, it's not
Sure.
like a huge game changer either way.
So I'm using this card when I can either get and make use of its recursion thing when I can push with it, or when I can use it to deliver an important power boost on curve.
Yeah, like if you're gonna choose between playing this or playing Assault, you probably usually want to play Assault. Assault's just better for her. Advantage
Right.
is really, really good for characters that set up during strikes.
Sure.
But and recursion is fine, but it is recursion. It is not a bad thing to have.
Okay.
So yeah, the rhythm beat, it's fine. It's maybe even good. It's nothing like show stopping.
Right.
Starstruck. All right, this card is weird. It is an unconditional range dodge at range 4 or greater. That's pretty good to have. Not necessarily good to like crutch on. It's for it doesn't hit at range 4,
Right.
and it will usually not hit at range 4.
It
So
it doesn't do anything to improve your position, although I guess you do get your character ability even on front side if you do it.
yeah, so it's a good defensive tool when it comes up. If you're not winning on speed, if they have something like a big sweep, which happens sometimes. I know Remulus has them. Some characters just have 1 to 5 sweeps, right? It's
Sure.
not or 1 to 4 sweeps. And so having an option against that is nice. The other thing is that at range 1, this card's pretty annoying because it'll beat sweep and other sweep likes pretty clean because it pushes them 3 and then they miss.
Right.
And you get extra power for your trouble, but it does lose to focus. It still gains +2 power, so it doesn't lose that hard. The +2 power is not dependent on pushing the opponent.
So
It's
in addition to being a range dodge, it's just a big safe mid speed.
Yeah, with low reward except at range 1.
Okay, sure, makes sense.
And potentially good reward at range 1. And it's also kind of a hybrid slow because it has, it's got slow stats, but mid-speed behavior, if that makes sense. It's kind of a
But
weird mishmash of a card.
in the early game, I assume it's also probably going to get me gauge, which I want.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I mean, if I play this at range 1, unless they cross me, and that's fine. You have follow-ups to cross. Unless they cross me, this probably trades,
sure. I mean,
and maybe even wins.
it looks like sweep. Sweep is fairly consistent.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have the 6 power in the discard, but it's got other stuff.
Sure. I'm sorry. Just in terms of gauge generation, it's got some sweep
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And honestly, because if you have Comet Chaser in your discard, any of your cards can be a mid speed by running away.
Mm.
That's always a threat, even on front side.
Okay.
Like if I can evade using a front side Comet Chaser, I will absolutely do it. That can save you a lot of life for stealing a card early.
Sure.
Losing
Okay.
Comet Tail is worth not eating sweep for sure, and even not even eating focus maybe.
Right. And again, it bears repeating that you will know, like, you don't need to commit that boost ahead of time if you're using
Yeah, yeah.
your after on a fast card because you just get to see what they played.
Yep.
Okay.
So Scrub is an odd card.
With a great name.
Amusingly, this card has been reprinted with other names. I think Zangief has it as Intimidate.
Yep.
Juno is not very intimidating. She just
She
has
just
scrubs.
calls you a scrub.
So I feel like that is not actually what this is. Isn't Scrub a DJ Scratch?
Why would I know that? What about me makes you think that I'm cool enough to know information like that? Do I sound like someone who's ever been to a club, Andarel?
Okay, so hell if I know, but I'm gonna go with no. But yeah, so a scrub is when you take a record and you slide it back and forth to make that like really
Right,
like
yeah, the
squeaky
scratch
noise.
thing. I get you.
Yeah, that's I think what this actually is
Okay.
referring to. But it could be both. It's really emotional damage. This card is worse than parry in some ways, and honestly in most ways, you can more likely hedge for a bunch of things, and it's harder to hit specifics unless they have really predictable ranges. It can be good at playing a game where you need to shut down an opponent's range options, where we're at range 3. I need to make sure that you don't hit me at range 3, or you're like really scary range 3 card.
Right.
But again, it's kind of a role player boost. It's non-recurable. Again, first world problems, but you do like your continuous boosts a lot. And yeah, it's perfectly respectable. It will sometimes parry a thing. More hand reveal is always nice in a world where reading exists. It's if you want to try and threaten a reading and other silly things, you just pick 9 or something, or
Right,
12.
sure. So in that example you just gave, like, we're at range 3, my opponent has a really scary range 3 option. I choose a card with 3. I mean, a lot of things that hit at 3 have range bands of 1 because movement exists.
Yeah, you'd have to pick one in that case.
This doesn't deal with any of those, and then they're just like, cool, I discard grasp.
Yeah, but if I pick, for example, 5 right against Ryu, and I hit either Metsu or Ryudoken, I'm not that sad. And
Right.
this does let me parry both of them,
Right.
which is a little unusual.
So it gives you it's what you said. It gives you a broader range of success, but not as a high a probability of hitting the exact card you want because your opponent has a
Yeah,
choice. Okay,
exactly.
interesting.
And if they have both, they get to pick which one to discard. But honestly, if I'm Ryu and I have to discard one of those two, I'm still sad either way.
Okay, it doesn't sound like, I mean, Starstruck seems like an okay attack, especially at range 1. It doesn't really sound like you're incredibly dying to play Scrub most of the time.
No, I mean they're both good. Like neither of these are bad card/boost combos, but because of the way Juno works and the fact that she's often just normal woman, and she doesn't really want to be sitting back and boosting. She wants to be either setting up for something big, playing, preparing, setting up for a big hit. You like doing a boost that doesn't give you stats. You have to really get value out of it. And
Right.
honestly, scrub can be great value, but it depends a lot on the opponent's character and what you're likely to hit.
Right. Okay. So this is very, very matchup dependent and very situation dependent. Otherwise, it's probably either Starstruck or maybe even just Force. It sounds like you said she has kind of a bad economy.
Yeah, I mean, if you play this for auto tuner, that's fine. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Pay the force cost.
Sure. Okay, I get you. But before we move on to the ultras, I actually had a couple questions about economy, and I feel like now that we're going to be getting into stuff that has gauge costs, it's a good time to ask.
Sure.
What like so she doesn't draw a lot of cards. She's going to be excuse me. She's got the ability to dig for cards if she needs to. Um, she's going to be hitting a lot, so she'll generate gauge just fine. She wants things in her discard. A lot of these things are making it sort of difficult to even evaluate like what her economy looks like for me. So am I I'm spending force to take the move action, I'm spending force to change cards, all of that stuff, but I'm also sort of trying to just get cards into discard, right?
Yeah, and if they go through gauge and get changed cards or get moved afterwards, that's fine. Your economy is bizarre because you don't really have any economy cards, right? You have one draw on Comet Tail.
Right.
But fundamentally, your big like the big thing that you have is if you how do I put it? It is always very dangerous to strike into you. Pretty much because then you get to set up kind of for free.
Oh, okay. So
And
so so not only is it dangerous to strike into you because you have above curve options and you probably have some boost down, but also just my character ability keys on defense, and that makes me my opponent's going to give me value when they do it.
so if you just pass turn and the opponent boosts, like if you prepare and they boost, you might just be fine preparing again, to be honest. Like you're not gonna get crushed by their boost, and you just have to assume you're gonna lose strikes sometimes. Your
Right.
cards are good enough fundamentally that you just eat the hit, maybe you wild swing, and then you boost back and punch back. So your economy is not you're not a character who needs to keep their hand size up, who like crumbles under pressure, because you can kind of play the game even with minimal cards in hand. You're always pretty scary.
Okay, that's interesting. So I've run a couple lessons on wild swingers at this point, and one of the things that like D has imparted to me a lot is for wild swing characters. And I'm not saying that Juno necessarily is a wild swing character, but I'm saying like for those characters, uh, your deck is your attacks. Your hand is mostly going to be boosts. Well, for
Yeah,
Juno,
she's the opposite.
yeah, for Juno, her discard pile is already boost. What do you need a hand for? You need it for attacks. And if
And yeah, and you want to sort of pair together attacks and boosts, and you can do that very flexibly,
right,
but you only need enough attacks to threaten whatever range you're at. Past
oh,
that, it's just work with it, right? Just
okay.
figure something out.
So I don't necessarily because like my game plan is going to be enabled more by what's in my discard pile. My hand is going to be like eventually I'm going to find an on curve button to put power on or something. It'll be fine. Um, so I don't need to really stress hand economy that much. It's more important to get my engine running by getting stuff in my discard to recur.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
And the fact that Drop the Mic does that instantly is why it's so valuable.
It's one of the reasons that's so strong. Okay, cool. So gauge economy probably going to be fine. I'm going to exceed. I might, we'll talk about the value of these ultras in a second. Um, spend some of it to get stuff in discard to play neutral because I'm like the move action is kind of a low tempo action, but not for me because I just spent auto tuner into discard pile. I'm threatening it later now.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how I should be thinking about it?
Yeah, and again, like the move action is less important in a world where you have advance 3 and advance anything and close 1 and close 2 and
Right,
after move
right.
1 and advance 2. So the move is relevant, but like change cards, for example, is
Sure.
pretty
Yeah.
annoying.
Change cards also kind of a low tempo action, but for me, it sets up a crazy threat.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So because again, like and this sort of came up a little bit with Alice. There's there's a couple ways that you can look at Exceed, right? You can play to win, you can like your character can be playing to win, meaning they play to just like hit really hard, pull off a combo, try and crush the opponent, or they can be playing to not lose, like the
Right.
Chips of the world, where they're kind of defensive. Joffrey's also like that, like they're defensive. They tend to trade a lot. They tend to be very much like the opponent doesn't get to play. Is kind of
Right.
the goal,
Right. And they're
and
they're
you can
kind of
have a little bit of both.
they're kind of going off value, right? Like they're just saying like over the long term, I'm gonna sort of nickel and dime you to death.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Juno kind of gets a little bit of both, and her ultra boosts are really where this comes. So Juno Live, it's got a silly stat line, but it does cost 3 gauge, and your gauge doesn't really turn on for a while. So I don't play this card very much. It's also a little unreliable because of its. So basically, to sort of summarize, it's a 1/3/9. You can put up to 3 cards face down. The opponent tries to guess what you played. If they get any of them right, they pick one. If you get any of them right, you lose them all. Otherwise, you get +2 power per card.
Weird.
You always discard them. So you are discarding extra. So this is quite an expensive card,
Right.
but it hits really hard at speed 9. You
Where where does it doesn't say where I'm placing the cards face down from.
from your hand.
It's from my hand? Okay. So yeah, wow, that's
From your hand.
really expensive then.
Yeah. It does not place up to 3 cards like from anywhere because that would
It's
be a
like
little
three of
silly.
clubs.
Yeah.
The
Yes,
Uno reverse
you don't
card.
get to like pull out a Yu-Gi-Oh deck and just
Okay.
drop 3 of like completely unpronounceable cards that no one will ever guess the names of, sadly.
Okay. Okay.
But
So they're from my hand. That's incredibly bizarre.
yeah. By the
But
way,
like
this is D's least favorite effect in the game. Uh,
really?
if you ever ask him about it, just because it's really annoying to resolve and also kind of random.
Sure. And what it sounds like is like in practice, who really cares? Because you're not probably not going to use this anyway.
You might put 1 card if it either kills or puts them into a dangerous kill range, where like it gets them to 4. If they're gonna go below like 7 or 6, you might spend 1 extra card just to lower them down,
Right.
right? Because it's easier for you to finish people off. But realistically, 3 gauge for 3 base power, maybe even 5, is not great.
Even at 9 speed.
Even at 9 speed, yeah. Speed only does so much.
Right. Yeah. At that point, what are you trying to? I mean, maybe in the meta where uh Soul Gazer, is that the name of the Alice's card? Where in a meta where speed 8 things exist, maybe it's more relevant. But
Not really.
yeah,
Like,
even then,
it's still just very expensive for 3 to 5 damage. And look, maybe you're a baller. If they do guess your card, you just don't get the bonus power. You still hit for at least 3.
right.
So if it might kill, then like, you do you. But it's always, they're always gonna know some cards that it could be, and it eats a bunch of your hand. So it's not really a fair it's not really like a great guessing game.
Right. But so to revisit the disclaimer that we made at the beginning of the video that you can play Exceed for fun and not just play to win. Like, please remember that when you're playing this card in particular, because it sounds like if you are a baller, it sounds like you could have some fun with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're not a baller, however, Mixed Break is phenomenal. So after move up to 1, good ability. Chip
Mm.
does good value with it.
Chip likes it.
And yeah, and sticking that onto any character, especially one with much better power numbers, is just really nice. So the thing about Mixed Break is that you never boost it because, like, sorry, you never use your ability to boost it until it's going to matter. And then when it's going to matter, you're like, oh, great. I dodged the thing. Huzzah. And what that means is that the opponent really needs to make you spend it. They need to guess right and force you to spend it to use your get out of jail free card, right?
Oh, okay. And okay. So even I'm not exceeded. This after effect
Yeah, it still
let's
happens. You still get it twice.
I can stack them and say cool, I get it, and now another after effect I do this. But in exceed mode, obviously I can just do it whenever I want. So,
Even in
so
normal mode, you can still do whatever you want, right? Because of it's an after. So for this card specifically, it doesn't matter if you're exceeded or unexceeded. You just do it.
right. Okay.
And so this is a card where that consideration that you mentioned earlier of like trying to get it into gauge versus trying to boost it comes into play. Because getting this card into gauge takes a long time. You need to get 6 gauge basically, because you're going to exceed first.
Right. Sure. And then
So
you're going to hit with it.
So you probably either boost it or spend it as force for something just to get mixed breaking your discard, because the opponent really has a different set of options to respect if you have mixed breaking your discard.
Interesting. So because like it really is like this is the first time that like it's very stark how non-committal your ability can be. That
Yeah,
you're like, yeah, whatever. I'll just dodge when I want to dodge, and you have to deal with that. That's really scary.
yeah. It's really good. It's not a huge effect. Obviously, people still can hit Chip, but
Sure.
given her other random ability and the ability that she just sometimes hits like a truck, it's pretty annoying. So yeah, mixed break is great. You will be boosting this a lot. You will be using it as force a lot and then boosting it a lot.
Yep.
You always get extra uses of it. So if you can hold it for reshuffle, great. If not, oh no, you probably dodged at least one attack with it.
Right. Maybe it's convenient then that Juno Live is not that great in attack because you really want to be using this
Yeah,
boost. Okay.
Meteor Jam is a better attack. So Meteor Jam is a little below curve, but again, you're so scary on curve that the opponent has to respect that. It hits for 7 at speed 5, range 2, so it'll stun sweep. It's only 2 gauge. It's a little hard to set up. You get decent value. You get to discard a card at random, which is great. You get a push, which is honestly less great. You don't really want them at range 4 all that much. It's fine, I guess. It makes dive scary, but range 4 is not a super special, amazing range for you. So if this card has plus speed, it starts looking really silly. Even whether it's the +3 speed for BPM Razor or the +2 speed, doesn't the difference between 8, 7, and 8 is kind of academic.
Right.
If you're trying to outspeed like a plus speed grasp or plus range grasp, it might matter, and those are relatively common. But the fact that this, with +3 speed outspeeds Lily Grasp, matters a lot. Mattered a lot more in the past, and matters now just to get the Axel, I guess.
Sure. Sure.
But yeah, so it's a fine card. You play it with a boost, which luckily you're good at. You can pretty easily make range 2 because you have Mixed Break and you have Comet Chaser. And you make range 2 also with potentially Technic Beat, definitely with Rhythm Beat if you get the push. So, you're fine at making range 2. So it's not like that's a problem per se. But the real thing about it is this is competing with Electric Slide. So I've talked a bunch about how her boosts are good, right? Like they're sort of situationally good, with Auto Tuner and Electric Slide being the standouts.
Right.
Auto Tuner wins games just by hitting really hard. Electric Slide wins games by making the opponent unable to play. So
Okay.
let's talk about Electric Slide because this boost is a little weird. So there are a bunch of boosts like this. They're not super common anymore, which are boosts that have a play condition. Like you have to pay the cost and then have some situation or else they get discarded.
Okay.
So Electric Slide says you have to, on play, advance 2, and if you switch sides, you get the buff of Ignore Guard. If you don't, you discard the boost from play. So
Okay.
does that make sense? This boost is an advance 2 boost unless it side swaps, and it's advance 2, and then for the strike, Ignore Guard.
Right. Okay. And
All right.
obviously, I can do it in the middle of a strike, and I assume that's where some of the weirdness is going to come into play.
Yeah, so as an after, Electric Slide is an after advance 2, which, is evasive. It can be nice. After Ignore Guard is pretty pathetic.
Right.
But, it's still after advance 2. It still can dodge stuff. This boost is fine. Notably, if I play after advance 2 and I switch sides, the Ignore Guard stays into the next strike, and so my Ignore Guard doesn't have to advance 2 and switch sides again. I have the Ignore Guard.
Right.
All right. A couple things that are important, and then we'll talk about why this boost is so dumb. First things first, you're fast, right? Advance Ignore Guard on a fast character, way better than Ignore Guard on a slow character.
Sure.
You have a couple of ways to break focus armor. You might not, but your ways to break focus armor are also kind of evasive, so you're not super concerned about getting hit back by focus. And 2 armor is not that common. You might eat a season desist or something similar to that. One of those mid-speed lose all armor cards.
Right.
But the reason this card is so insane is very simple, and it's this. When Juno exceeds, this card is truly off the wall, because it is now if this card is in your discard and you're at range less than 4, you might just have ignore guard. Like it just ignore guard might just show up whenever you
Again,
want.
at at post reveal option select timing when you can decide when you need it.
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
And not only is it that, it's also hit confirm. Right?
Yeah,
So
sure. On a more modern templating, would this be a now advanced two
yes,
spaces?
this would be
Like
a now advanced 2.
I still get this during strikes, like that all still happens. It's a continuous boost. I do all my stuff. Um, but that also just means that I can play above curve grasp if I want.
So yeah, so like let's take a reasonable position, right? I'm here. Okay.
Sure.
This we've somehow generated. Actually, I'm here. Actually, we generated range 4. Maybe I hit with Starstruck, or I did play it across or something.
Right.
I do the obvious thing and play Comet Tail. Strike with Comet Tail.
Yep.
You lose the strike. There is nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So there
So
are a couple things that could happen. If I have a Comet Chaser in play in my discard, or if you focus specifically, you can cover Electric Slide, because otherwise I advance 3 and then I advance 2. I hit with Ignore Guard, and then I keep
right.
Ignore Guard into the next strike with Juno speeds.
Right.
If I have Comet Chaser in my discard, like I can Comet Chaser out and dodge the focus too.
Right.
So in that, like you can focus that. Also, I could just not play. I could not play Comet Tail. I could
Yeah.
play, dive and throw Auto Tuner on dive and hit for 8 and crush your focus. That's a reasonable thing to do.
And like I mean, so the card I chose to play, I do choose ahead of time. But in that situation that you just described, like if I have both of these cards in my discard, the other Comet Tail is what I just played, and I see the focus come out, I'm like, cool, I just won't play Electric Slide. It's
Yeah,
fine.
like there's no
Like,
reason to.
yeah, I've committed almost nothing to it.
If you're at range 5, you can also Mix Break backwards, right, to get out of it, because it lets you after move up to 1 and retreat 1.
Right.
The other
So
thing with Electric Slide that's silly is that you can use. So not only is the advance 2 a disadvantage where it's kind of awkward for you to hit, at closer ranges it's very, very good. So if you play Grasp at range 2 and boost Electric Slide before, this is now a like range 2 Ignore Guard Grasp.
yeah, that I mean,
Like that doesn't lose.
we had a whole lesson on Jeanette, and how ridiculous her Carmine Offering was. What if Carmine Offering also had flexible positioning on it?
Yeah, and also hit for 3 instead of 2, and also didn't have to be was way less committal.
Right. And and also you could decide to play it after you saw your opponent's attack, basically.
I mean, you're probably gonna play it because
Oh, sure, because you're grasping at range 2, of course, sure.
Yeah, but again, if they play block, for example, like maybe you just play Mix Break.
Right.
Or you just don't play anything, and you're like, oh no,
Oops.
I miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, oops. So you also have the cross up cross, right? You go here and then go 3.
And also Ignore Guard in case you somehow need
to.
to.
And then you can throw it. Well, and then you're here, and you can throw an Ignore Guard Comet Tail next strike.
Ugh. Yeah, I got to remember that it stays in play afterward. That's really, really mean. So this is probably 2 free strikes that I get every time I play.
Probably, yeah. Probably.
Okay. The one that I decide to use it on and the next one, I will both of them will be almost unquestioned. And okay, cool. Now this next one is going to hit for 5 instead of 2.
There is one other notable use for it, which is if the opponent's crosses are down or they're near the corner, you can also use it to confirm something like a sweep or a meteor jam, because you can just give your sweep before advance 2.
Sure.
Or give your meteor jam before advance 2 and hit for 7. So even without the Ignore Guard, it can still be flexible hit confirm on a kill card.
Right. All right. So I don't even need the ability to get behind my opponent to make use of it.
You will lose it for the next strike if you do that, because it's not going to stay in play.
Oh, okay. So the otherwise discard from play, you got your hit confirmed, you don't get anything else off of it. Interesting.
Yeah, but if it wins the game, who cares?
Who cares? Sure. Yeah. So in that situation, Oh no, sorry, discard from play. No, that works. Then it would be sealed afterward if I did it from discard.
Yeah, it's
Um,
just sealed.
so for both of these ultra boosts, they are, and honestly, probably for most of our continuous boosts in general, they are in exceed mode. Um, Arrows that you have in your quiver to at any time affect the outcome of a strike. It's just that mix breaks uh, use case band of use cases where it could be useful is way smaller than electric slides, where it's like I'm gonna have trouble finding a situation where I can't win a strike with this.
It's actually they're sort of analogous. So mix break is much better before you flip because electric slide is pretty committal, and like if you play this, if you boost this with your base ability, they probably just tech it, and then you've lost an electric slide for good, which is pretty
Right.
bad. And mix break is an after, and also it's much more flexible. So which is saying something because like you don't have to boost it, so you can always move 0 by not spending anything.
Right.
But the fact that you can just be like, whenever you want, hey, I can choose to move on anything is pretty nice, especially with my ability not caring, and losing Juno live is not that big a deal. Electric Slide, because it's so much better when it does work, is more like you feel more pressure to use it, right? Like it's harder to make work, but the reward is a bit higher.
Right. So you are
With
going to
that
be you're,
said,
you're going to be actively setting up situations to use electric slide. Mix break it might fall into your lap, and you'll be like, "Cool, mix break," and you'll just no bot of a strike for free.
yeah. The other thing with your abilities is you have a lot of close, but like advanced 2 and close is usually kind of a non-bow unless you're like right with these assault likes, unless you're kind of right at the right range band,
Right.
especially if you have to cross up. So like rhythm beat, you can from range 4 you can close 2 and then move 1.
Right.
But unless you're at exactly 4, it's or I guess if you're at 1, 2, or 4, you can do it because then you can go
But
here, close.
specifically not in the situation where you would be playing it as safely as possible. So the the I mean one of the benefits of Juno's Exceed mode is that you are not committing very much because the boost is just in your discard pile. But when you are playing a card like that range 2 grasp that you described, you're committing because you are playing a card that doesn't work unless you use electric slide. So you really hoping that electric slide comes out or is usable in that situation. Am I kind of thinking about that right?
Yeah, but like also it's just if you're at range 2 for whatever reason, electric slide is extremely scary.
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to. If you're not at range 2, okay, like maybe you have to play around it a little bit. But a lot of your cards will somehow make electric slide work. You know, assault at range 4, technic beat at range 1 or 2, rhythm beat at range 4, 1, 2, or 4, comet tail, like honestly pretty much anywhere. Sonic Comet basically never. Starstruck, like potentially, if you do that and then, push them 3, but like that's a mid speed, so it's not as big of a deal. But also, you saw what they played. You don't have to do it.
Right, sure.
Also, dive, can start like range 5 dive is always a nice thing to have. You go like 3-2 or 2-3.
And in like okay, so if dives crossing up didn't already win the strike for free, maybe I can also stun my opponent and win the strike for free that way instead.
Yeah, and I'd get an extra range out of the deal.
Right, yeah, land where you want to land, sure. I
The
I
time
can't
where rhythm beat does make a lot of sense with electric slide is if you are carrying a light into it,
okay.
because like then what are they going to do? Your speed 7.
Now your speed 7 ignore guard. Again, we've generated another Carmine offering just from those two stats alone.
Yeah, speed 7 ignore guard hits at 1, 2, or 4 and recurs and passes the ignore guard into the next strike. Honestly, this is even better with assault than it is with rhythm beat because you get advantage out of the deal. So you
You just do
probably
it.
get a free strike. You're now at range 1 with ignore guard.
Yep.
You throw whatever, throw grasp, pull out auto tuner or fierce out on it if you want.
So how does that hold on. So wait. I think I've just figured out one of the reasons why this card is so weird. All right, so I play it once from
Yes.
discard. It is on the strike. It has entered play. I get my now effect that is now not templated as a now effect. Cool. I got
Yeah.
advantage because I played assault. It is now my turn. I strike again. I advance 2 again.
No, no.
Okay, I
Now
just
effects only happen when you first play the boost.
but because I already switched sides, I still have ignore guard.
Correct. This ability only gets discarded if you advance. If when you advance 2, you fail to switch sides immediately when you play it.
Okay, but the
Once it's
ignore guard is a passive effect. I just keep it.
yes,
Ugh. All right, that's really gross.
yeah. So this would be templated as ignore guard. Now advance 2. If you switch sides, discard, or if you did not switch sides, discard this boost.
Okay, and
That
ignore
would be
guard
like the modern
just
templating
stays
for it.
regardless. Then gotcha.
Yeah,
All right, so
because
that's the kit. Um, God, that ability is messed up, Andarel. Some of those combos that you were
yeah,
describing
it's
are scary. I can see why she was banned. That's scary as hell.
yeah, and so you can also probably see like why she took so long to get banned, because even though she's super silly, it's not like, hey, this is game breaking and like it's a hammer.
Yeah,
It's just like a value engine, and season 1 had a lot of those, to be honest, and some of them are very scary.
right. I
You're
mean,
in a world of rocket launchers here.
yeah, I mean, my role on this show is the exceed idiot, and you can kind of measure the the complexity of how scary a character is by how long it takes me to get it. And you were talking about Alice, and I was like, oh, that's messed up. On like card number 2, it took me a minute with Juno to see why this is such a problem. So I can see why it took people a while.
Yeah,
Um, does she basically? I mean, you've already mentioned that most of her like payout options are going to be coming from normals. Um, are there are those normals pretty much just used the way anyone else would use normals if they had access to +3 power and +3 speed
yeah,
and electric slide on demand?
yeah. Like she's got flexible range, so if she ends up somewhere that she doesn't want to be, she can either boost run to get in, or she can play Comet Tail to get in, right?
Right.
Because it's a very different world if you have to once you're exceeded, right? There's some like people need to think about in strike movement in very specific ways. Usually if you're trying to deal with in strike movement, you just play the card that hits where they're going to be, right?
Right.
But usually those are your like defensive big rangey options typically. And in a world where electric slide exists, that is very dangerous.
Those will kill you, especially because you haven't committed to either of these things uh, when they're in your discard pile. So you have them mix up live all the time.
And the fact that like she can jump in with something like Comet Tail to get to fix a range issue and still threaten multiple layers of Fierce versus Auto Tuner versus Electric Slide versus Mix Break versus maybe Comet Chaser
Right.
versus like nothing or defend is really annoying, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's just much harder to deal with that. So she can kind of do stuff for free in a similar way to like how Chip can kind of threaten that because he has a decent range of options. But Chip doesn't get to boost power or electric slide the way she does. If Chip is boosting that kind of defensive ignoring, he has to commit a lot more resources to it.
Sure. I mean, even the normal boosts, like normal continuous boosts from seasons 1 through 5 had more stats on them in general than more
Yeah.
recent boosts tend to have.
Yes, that's very important too. And then with the recursion especially.
Sure. Yeah. I know that she has better versions of sweep and of light and fierce, but light and fierce are still like fierce is like more power than Chip has on any of his boosts for himself, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
Okay.
got what? One power on Daijoubu and one power on the Make an EX on
Yeah.
Badass, and like that's it.
Yeah.
And then his numbers are one like he's got a 5, but she's got a 7.
Right.
He's got a bunch of ones, and she doesn't really have an Alpha Blade equivalent. Like Comet Tail is quite similar to Alpha Blade, right? It hits for 4 if it crosses up. She gets the draw card and has 2 less power.
Right.
But that's a different ballpark because of the amount of power she can throw onto things and like the thing with a character like Chip, for example, is that you sort of beat Chip by hedging your bets and hitting a bunch of range bands, or by going fast when he's finally running low on fasts and has to
Right.
play a mid speed or something. Because he's got really scary fasts, but like he's got I think 3 of them. He's got like a 6, 7, and 9,
Right.
and then he's got a 5, which is below curve. she's got more, like, she's actually faster than Chip is.
Right. And
Just
she doesn't need to commit anything until it's time to commit something.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's like the thing that is that a lot of the time that you have to deal with characters like that by sort of hedging your bets, and she just does that better than you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you need to make her
She's constantly hedging her bets and can just commit whenever she needs to. That's so messed
yeah.
up.
So you need to make her spend her cards somehow, which means you have to throw enough power at her that she has to be like, I'm going to nope out of this strike if she has the right cards. If she doesn't have the right cards, and she's never going to have like everything she wants in her discard, right? Like we're assuming that she always has Meteor Gem in her discard and it's not like at the bottom of her deck, or it's
Sure.
not, or Technique's not at the bottom of her deck. That's a real concern for her. And that's why Drop the Mic is so important, to be honest, is just to get that extra like pile of cards. So that is, you're not hedging against everything, but she can make you hedge against enough that you like really have to commit.
Right. Harder than she does. So the onus is always on you to kill her because she if she just leans back and and waits for the mix up to occur to her, she'll probably win it.
Yeah, I mean, or she'll lose the mix up and then be in a situation where she like just goes off the next strike because you spent a bunch.
Because well, and because you gave her her ability to set up the next strike later
Potentially, yeah.
by hitting her. Okay. So she uses her normals normally. She uses her normal boost normally, allowing for the fact that she has other better boosts for some of the stat boosts. Um she's the overall shape of the game plan, exceed as fast as possible, get useful boosts into my discard pile, um, kind of rely on the fact that my opponent is going to be afraid of striking into me and giving me value to run my economy at a pace that I'm comfortable with despite my kind of mediocre card draw. And then once I'm all set up, the end game is that I just win strikes and there's nothing they can do about it.
Well, so the thing about that makes Juno like weird, and that is kind of why she sent so long to get banned, is that if you think about like ideal Juno endgame, right? You're in your second reshuffle, you have a very large discard, you can just like win whatever you want.
Yeah.
When that happens, unless they're already kind of at low life, you're at a very real chance of getting decked.
Okay.
So the what's hard about Juno is that you need to manage what cards you discard in your first reshuffle, what cards you discard before you exceed, or what cards, sorry, not discard, what cards you ability before you reshuffle, after you reshuffle, when you discard, because it's not going to go perfectly. You're going to lose some value here and there, and you have so much value that you can afford to bleed some,
Right.
but you do have to make pretty hard choices. The hardest choices with Juno aren't anything that other characters have to deal with about like hand management and positioning. You don't really care that much about those. You care a little
Right.
bit of hand management. You care a little bit of positioning.
you
It's
you
like,
you care about like, do I use auto tuner now on this card? I'm at my first reshuffle. I won't be able to get it back later. Will the game last
yeah,
that long? Like those kinds of long term decision making choices.
and like landing an auto tuner before you flip and chunking them for an extra 3 and like stunning them is really good.
Yeah,
It's
but I'm
but
losing auto tuner.
yeah, and you're kind of losing 2 auto tuners
Yeah, exactly. Interesting.
because you don't get the reshuffle one and you also don't get the extra one from the year before. And you also,
Right.
it's way less consistent because you have to actually go into the strike fairly.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So that's where Juno is hard. And what happened was that like I've had games against Juno where I play someone like Imogene, was a good early game, and like literally you just run her over. You're like, turn 1, strike. Turn 2, strike. Turn 3, strike. Turn 4, maybe get some cards back. Turn 5, strike.
Right.
And like, sure, you've exceeded. Also, you're at 12 life or
And
15
and
life.
and you haven't had time to curate your discard pile yet.
Exactly. That's how you
Okay.
kill Juno.
Okay. So
So
the counterplay is that Juno makes everybody into a rushdown character.
yes,
Okay.
because
Okay.
if she has time to set up, and like she just sort of sets up by playing the game, like she wants a discard, she wants gauge, she wants to like lower your life a little bit. He doesn't really care about her life that much. It's a resource, but when you're a very evasive, kind of good at shutting down the opponent strikes characters, you're not like treasuring every point of life to trade with, right? You're not.
Right.
It's just not your thing. You're willing to spend 10 life if it gets you set up because you probably use the other 20 better than the opponent does.
Right. And when you are set up, the game might be over.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so someone like, Alice that we mentioned earlier, Alice has to spend resources to like fix bad positioning issues if she gets stuck in them.
Right.
That's not really the case with Juno. Juno can always fix positioning by like playing a fast card and popping mix break, or playing a fast card and popping comet chaser, or boosting run, and like she's good.
Right.
It's like Juno is way more flexible, but she has that ebb of flow of like around the reshuffle she gets much weaker for a little bit. So you might want to like keep good cards like in your hand, but then they're not in your deck
They're
and you're
not in
kind
your
of
debt.
losing the
Yeah.
use, but you might want them in your
Interesting.
hand anyways. Like it's often really good to go into the reshuffle with a drop the mic in your hand, so you can just boost it immediately and not lose that.
Immediately get stuff into your, because you said once per cycle, because
Yeah,
you're at your worst at the beginning of a cycle, but by your reshuffle you've probably exceeded. You need to go now.
yeah. So like
Okay.
that's actually a real concern. You often want a rhythm beat in your hand at the time that you reshuffle. So that's kind of what makes her a little bit complex, is that there's a lot of little things that you can mess yourself up on, and the upside is enormous, but her stats aren't that great with that boost. So if you're
Right.
just sort of like freewheeling it and not getting really good value, you're not going to win. That's just not you're
Right.
not your cards just don't do that much.
And against an opponent. So, and now we are talking about counterplay, which is traditionally sort of the last part of the lesson. So if I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead of you, if you do have more strategic stuff to tell me about Juno, please go ahead.
No, it's kind of ties together. Like she's one of those characters where the play and the counterplay really fit together a
Right.
lot.
And really the universal counterplay to Juno is legitimately just steamroll her before she steamrolls you.
Yes, you can always steamroll her. Her early game is bad. Her cards are fast and annoying, but they bear significant risk. Until she gets a Juno Live in her discard, her defensive options are basically zero. Like Juno Live is her early game defense, and it has to be in her discard to make that work.
Right.
She's got Starstruck as a like kind of iffy mid speed, and she's got like the fast mix up, and those do carry you pretty far, to be honest. Like having an annoying range one mid speed and having two fast cards to shut down things like dives and fast projectiles is actually quite annoying to deal with.
Right.
But if you call those and you hit her for 4 to 6, when she
Sure.
plays those cards, you can get into a pretty good situation early.
Yeah, I mean those, like what you've described as a mix up. And mix ups are interactive. My opponent has a choice and can play things. Once I'm late game and I have like, all right, cool. I saw what you played and I get to choose between electric slide or mix break in terms of how I want to kill you, or auto tuner. It's not interactive anymore. I just do the thing and you don't have a choice.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot like how Zolt sort of becomes less interactive as the game goes on.
Yeah.
Juno like just becomes harder and harder to play against as the game goes on. And even though she starts off honestly kind of weak, she truly goes insane by like certainly near the end of the first cycle when she's exceeded, and then like middle of the second cycle, she's an absolute monster.
Right. Okay. Because
And
at that point she's not saving anything. She's just like, I am trying to kill you, and there's no third reshuffle. I don't have to worry about sealing things anymore.
yeah, you're just doing stuff like
Right.
you just get as much value as possible. All the downsides are gone.
Okay.
And so like she has real issues again if Technic Beat is near the bottom of her deck, because that's a lot of her power budget is literally in Technic Beat.
Right.
But she'll make it work. She might have to actually play Meteor Jam, which is also kind of annoying. She might have to like play Sweep. But again, if you're trading, that can be pretty good for her as long as she's set up enough that she, can kill you.
Right.
She's not like Alice where she's going to be like, you're at 20, oops, you're dead.
You're dead
That's
right
just
now. She's
like,
got
she
to win
can't
a
do
lot of
that.
strikes. She can just win strikes very well.
But she can be like, you're at 5, just scoop. You're not going to win.
The game is over.
Literally something like play block, end of strike, BPM raiser, place next strike, like you strike into her, she plays block, end of strike, BPM raiser, uh her turn, strike, electric slide for range on spike, and now that's a 2 to 5 speed 6 spike, right? Like you're just dead.
What are you gonna do?
Like it's you're just dead.
Right.
So that's like a trivial setup, right? Like all you need to have for that is a Sonic Comet and a Meteor jamming your discard.
and a card to hit
Like,
with, and you have plenty.
yeah, and if if she has Spike, which is a reasonable card for her to have, or any other like big chunky card, like that could be game,
Yep.
just right there.
Yep.
Worst case, she plays something like Assault instead, and now you have some advantage on speed 8, and she throws power on it or something. Like, she's very good at finding a way to kill you. So
She doesn't have like a bespoke combo route. She's like looking at her hand, and then she's like, "Oh wait, I have this entire other hand of boosts down here that I can make work."
yeah,
Okay,
yep, and you just do it, right? You just do it, and honestly, it's pretty good, and that's why she got banned.
it seems like it's
Because
pretty good. Yeah.
what ended up happening was that she started off and people got people got okay at playing against her because people tend to rush down a lot, and a lot
Mhm.
of characters in season 2 especially tended to be kind of engine builder-y. But like as the game developed, it turned out that like one, her engine was just too consistent. She still steamrolled those engine builder-y characters even after they built their engine,
Right.
and people just got good enough at the defensive aspects of her to just not lose that hard in the early strikes.
Not lose hard enough to get denied the engine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what happens is that because you have to hit her hard and early, people have to play mix-ups against her, and mix-ups by their nature aren't consistent.
Sure.
So even if you play against her optimally, you still need to win a couple coin flips to not get steamrolled.
You're incurring risk whenever you do that. Yeah. Okay. So even in like optimal play, you will never have a perfect strategy against Juno.
Yeah. So there are things that you can do to help beat Juno. The first thing that you need to know about Juno that is I've mentioned earlier, her defenses are either Starstruck or very speed reliant. She
Right.
can break the speed curve with Electric Slide, but again, that probably doesn't ignore guard if she does.
Right.
And she can boost BPM Razor, but she can't double boost BPM Razor because before speed doesn't do anything. So if you're fast, she can actually have a lot of trouble with that. However, there are two problems to this theory. First, being fast at close range is not actually that helpful a lot of the time, right? Because that's where the defensive mix-up is strongest.
Sure.
And being fast at long range means you have to be outspeeding Sonic Comet and Comet Tail, and like, good luck.
Good luck.
So, so it sounds great in theory. It's rough in practice unless you have a lot of speed boosts. So
Right.
someone like Chip, can rush down. I have concerns about his longevity into her. Like, she does need to boost, like, she needs to hit him, which is a concern. But because she doesn't have to boost power unless she's really, really likely to hit, it it's different. I'm not sure. I would honestly need to play that matchup to find out.
Right.
Um, you can beat her by having wide range bands and also armor or defense. Obviously, Joffrey messes with things a lot by virtue of being able to cancel boosts.
Oh God. Yeah.
Uh, though amusingly, I don't think Joffrey can cancel her ability as worded because it is not playing the boost; it is return a boost
It's
to play
returning a
without paying its
boost to.
cost.
Okay. Interesting.
The without paying its cost is also important because you get a discount on these two boosts as if
Sure.
she needed that. But Joffrey does have like a lot of free armor, which is annoying for her because that's just more armor for her to chew through. So characters like Imogen or characters maybe like Leo potentially, Pot could boost a lot of armor, but he has trouble hitting.
Right. People
So
who can just like raise their effective life total.
yeah, that's pretty good against her because like she does only have so much power. It's gonna be a problem for her to just keep hitting you.
Right.
If especially if the auto tuner is down or if you can like. And what's funny is you can't parry her boosts because that just puts them in discard faster and you spent a block.
Right.
But if you block the turn that she already has a boost in play, for example, like if she auto tunes on the previous strike and then you block the second strike, that's pretty good. You're just like beating her is not. You can't win a fair fight. It's just not going to work. So you
Right.
have to basically mitigate as much as possible, and often that does mean block. Like block auto tunes, block electric slides, or outspeed electric slides if you can on the second play. Like you're trying to mitigate that second turn as much as possible because you're not going to win the first turn. It's basically impossible.
Right.
But the second turn is a
She's
little
decided the terms. She knows that it's happening. You can't surprise her with an EX attack because you've already played your card.
yeah. And the second turn is much like easier to deal with in theory, but now she has two boosts.
Right.
And so that's where things get hairy. But again, if she's constantly weaving boosts, she is going to run out of discard eventually. So if she runs out of discard before you die, that's
You might have a chance.
great. You might win.
Right.
There is a chance you win.
Right.
But
Okay.
her deck and resources are really what like you mentioned with Wilson characters. Her discard pile is sort of that like murder pile where she's trying to pull as much as possible from. And
Right.
as the more she does that, the more her options decrease. So if you can deal with the barrage, she's probably not drawing cards. So that's a real concern. Like if you can weather the storm, you can definitely win. Juno is definitely beatable. But you need to really be leveraging a character with good defensive tools, ideally auto dodges or speed agnostic stuff, or just some way to cheat out winning a strike that she can't deal with without committing heavily to it.
Right.
Because she doesn't if she doesn't need to, she's not going to. She's gonna throw down fierces or throw down auto tuners. And if she's consistently hitting with fierces and auto tuners, you don't have enough life to win.
You
You
know
just
what
don't.
the dynamic that you're describing reminds me of is characters who like not an overall play pattern, but characters who rely really heavily on what is that boost from season 6 called? Soul's Oath, the Byakuya boost, where like the way that you play around that is to basically make them spend it, because otherwise it will just keep on being a thorn in your side all game. Like with things like mix break, you she can hold them over your head forever, so you need to like present a compelling enough reason for her to use it without overcommitting so much that by allowing her to make you whiff, you have lost a ton. So
Yeah,
you're
and
trying to hit that
that's
like a
why it's
weird
so
sweet spot.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah,
And like her arsenal is way stronger than Soul's Oath, right? Like Soul's Oath is nice. Soul's Oath is not electric slide. Soul's
sure,
Oath is not auto tuner. Or even Soul's Oath is not even Comet Chaser. But Soul's Oath is pretty good.
right,
And these are like a tier above, and also she doesn't have to spend life sustaining them, right?
sure. And I mean, the reason I bring that up is not necessarily the quality of the boost itself. I more mean like if Ryu puts down Way of the Warrior and then throws Assault or something, and Juno uh, uh or throws something, and Juno evaluates that situation as the time to use Mix Break to nope out, then Ryu has committed so much that Mix Break got its value even though Juno spent it. So Ryu has to like find this weird sweet spot where he needs to present a compelling enough threat to waste Mix Break, but not commit so much that he dies by the loss of his resources.
Yeah.
It,
And so a really interesting card for that with Ryu specifically is something like 1-inch punch. Right? Because
okay,
1-inch punch will always lose to Mix Break, pretty much.
sure, you just back up.
You just back up. But 1-inch punch is also like it's got armor, it's got really high value. It might even beat electric slide by virtue of having armor.
Yep.
So the thing now is that if I'm Juno, and this is where things get so interesting, that assumption that you just made, right, about Way the Warrior, is actually kind of wrong for one very important reason,
Okay.
which is my ability happens on before. It is not on reveal. So if you outspeed me, my
Oh, sure.
evasiveness doesn't that doesn't matter at all. If Wave the Warrior on Assault at speed 7, unless I play Juno live, I'm probably not getting the chance to even use my ability until after you hit me.
I see.
So things that mess with speed in particular, like speed boosts, can actually limit her options quite a bit.
Okay.
That's why, for example, Lucia has consistently did pretty well into her during that, because Lucia is very fast, and in particular, Thunderbird can deliver enough power at high enough speed that Juno's endgame is a little more fragile.
Right.
But that, so like that's kind of what I mentioned earlier. If you're doing something like Way of the Warrior, Juno might just eat it. Like she'll just be like, "Ow, I took a bunch of damage. You committed a lot. It's my turn. Maybe I
So
wild swing."
so in that kind of paradigm that I established earlier, that you are trying to present a compelling enough threat to make her waste her important cards. Now you've presented too good a threat, and she's like, "I'll just keep them."
Yeah, yeah.
And
She's
not and maintain my engine for later. So the sweet spot is even smaller.
Yeah, and what that means is that so her ability is much stronger in one of two situations. Either she is going first, which she does a lot because she's fast,
Yep.
and can evade you, or she is going second and she is not worried about evasion. She is just straight up throwing power, which means she's trading.
Right.
Like those are the two situations that are worried. Mid speeds and fasts go first, slows go second.
Right.
Throwing electric slide on a slow is like fine, but it's probably not, you're not really doing it for the ignore guard. You're doing it for the hit confirm,
Yeah,
and
you're
then maybe
doing it
next
for a
time ignore
range
guard,
5 sweep.
or you're doing it like yeah for like that's the only real reason. You're
Right.
probably not gonna unless you think you really if you're like a range 2 and you really want to pass electric slide into the next strike. But that's like if you're not flipped. If you're flipped, like just save electric slide.
Yeah.
So
Use it twice.
Comet Pacer can be used on either, really. That's just flexible. But generally, her best case scenario is she's going first. So if you can mitigate that either by having a dodge that makes it so she doesn't go first, like that it doesn't matter that she goes first, or if you have a way to just outspeed her, especially with boosting speed, this whole ability starts falling apart.
Okay.
She can, of course, boost speed and pass it into the next strike. But again, she doesn't really get to double boost speed. She can't
Right.
even with befores. So her speed resources are a little bit limited.
Despite being a fast character, she just has some copies of this in light.
Yeah, she is, however, very fast. So if you're going to boost speed, it has to be on like a kill shot. If you're just trying to win against her with random plus ones, that's a little risky.
I get you. Okay. Okay.
And Juno Live is a real threat
Yeah.
against speed based checkmates, especially because this still can hit right with electric slide.
Jeez. Yeah.
And this ignores guard with
Ignores
electric
guard
slide.
at 9 speed.
So yeah, so it's a 1, 3, or 5, like 1, 3 plus 9 ignore guard with. So that deals with a lot. If I'm fighting someone like Chip, for example, he's got to commit a hell of a lot to be safe from Juno Live.
Sure.
That's basically too much. That's basically just too much.
Right. Yeah.
That is
And
everything he has and more.
this is why she's banned.
So yeah, the problem is basically that you end up in these weird random situations where she gets a lot of value, and then also she can oops win. And she's not oops winning by that much, but it's enough that like your setups might randomly break,
Right.
or your like value card just whiffed, or she managed to stun it out, and now your character starts falling apart because you don't have enough options to deal with the constant barrage of stats.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
mean, that is a compelling case for her being unreasonable. It makes sense why she's banned.
yeah, and I will say that characters like Melian, Ulrich, Lily, um, to a lesser extent Zoe, do all kind of have that play pattern. They all want to get into a situation where they can leverage their cards and overwhelm you, and they're all pretty good at it.
Right.
They are just not quite as consistent as Juno, but they have enough nonsense of themselves that on those off turns where they can like sneak a win somewhere. And so Juno like was definitely a tier above, but it's not like she's unbeatable, right?
Right.
Like characters can leverage their nonsense. She can lose mix-ups. She can get really deck comp screwed, much more so than some other characters, where your power and your like meteor jams and your technique beats are either at the bottom of the deck or you hit all four of them with a stop drop the mic,
Right.
and then you can't boost them as much. So it's not the end of the world, but it's not great.
Right. And
And
it
so
actually
like
can affect her win rate.
yeah, it is noticeable, especially if the first reshuffle is when you have to make a choice near the end of your first deck go through as to how much you're going to risk the cards that you want in your second go through being near the bottom. Because the card that's near the bottom of your deck is a card that probably is not going to contribute, and you might just want to play that from your discard now.
Right. And the alternative is that you're giving up even the opportunity to see it again, but you get it now instead.
Yeah, and you're digging for it maybe, but like you're bad at digging without drop the mic.
Right.
You generate gauge fine, and you don't really spend gauge on that much, so you might change cards or move, but that's kind of it. And your ultras are both good to spend as force, it's nice to have like one Juno Live in your hand just in case as an attack,
Right.
but so you can spend them for force and then boost them from discard. That's perfectly reasonable and often like what I would do, but it's still kind of a commitment.
Sure. All
So yeah,
right. So that's
I
Juno.
guess yeah, I guess the last thing is sort of talking about the characters that are similar,
Yeah,
and
please.
he's a weird one. So definitely Zolt, definitely Zolt. He has a very similar sort of slow escalation, really really hard to play against at the tail end of his cycle once he exceeds. Not super resource dependent, but he plays from his hand instead of his discard, so he's much more committal
Right.
than Juno is.
Right.
Uh, Iaquis has his exceed mode is a little Juno-y, that like make your own attack thing. Shovel Knight actually has a lot of the neutral things. He also has +3 speed and power boost, so he's got very dominant neutral boosts and the ability to sort of upgrade them with some of his silly cards.
Yep.
He's going to win by playing much again, like try and bury you in stats and playing kind of a defensive game. Season 3, that's a harder one. I mean, Viper's explosive, but she's much more committal. Vega's again much more committal. Guile's kind of the defensive boost neutral E character who builds up a huge hand a lot of the time if you're playing that route. So Guile sort of shares a bit of DNA, but again, like he's committal. And almost no one's going to be as non-committal as Juno. That's just
Right. Yeah.
what
That's
she
why
does.
she's banned.
Chun-Li actually can be very non-committal, boost heavy, and really wants to exceed as fast as possible. So I think if you like Juno, you probably and is fast. So Chun-Li is probably your best pick across probably in total.
Okay.
Shovel Knight, maybe Shovel Shields. No one else really. Uh, Blaze Blue. No one else too aggressive. Lychee's bad at neutral boosting, but good otherwise. Platinum has a lot of that like boost flow and is much more fair than Juno. So if you do like getting like boost recursion, boost shenanigans, Platinum's really fun.
Right.
Platinum's also quite tactical and has a lot of interesting things there. Rachel, to a lesser extent, can also
Tons
be
of
like
tons of
that.
neutral control.
Yeah, neutral control, decent speed control, respectable boosts, though not like amazing, and a lot of just very flexible, like tactical mini combo type stuff.
Right.
Season 6, I mean, Carmine is the obvious comparison and is banned.
Right. Sure.
For the same reason, honestly, that Juno is banned, like stats, value, and
And
committalness.
it doesn't need to commit to anything.
Yeah.
You mentioned Wagner
Uh,
having a similar kind of DNA,
yeah,
like sharing DNA.
Wagner has a bit of DNA. She's very boost oriented. She's got sort of like recursion backup boosting. She's got the ability to pull boosts back from gauge,
Right.
so she can also recur your boost. So Wagner's a reasonable one. Uh, Byakuya a little bit also, though not as much. I mean, he's got
Same.
decent.
Goes above curve, digs for cards, neutral control with Soul's Oath. I can see some similarities.
Yeah, he's also got the like weird speed stuff because of caught you. He's
Yep.
got like little explosive mini combos. He's got some silly ignore guard with Endless Nightmare. He's kind of similar. Season 7, that's a tough one. So Jacko and Ramlethal probably have the closest DNA, where Ram is again like spend cards to do neutral, but Ram does it by economy, and as we mentioned, Juno's economy is kind of backwards.
Right.
Uh, Jacko can play a boost recursion e game, but again, her she's way more committal. Uh,
Okay. Everything that Jacko does is incredibly expensive.
yeah, Chaos can kind of play that like weird non-committal game, but his boosts are bad. Chip is probably the closest, and maybe Milia. Milia and Chip are both very flexible. They both can do a lot of mini combos. Chip is much more defensive. Milia is a bit more aggressive.
Right.
I would say probably Chip and Milia are the two closest to, which makes sense. They're like the two sort of speedsters, and for Chip, and also a speedster, but slightly less so for
Right.
Milia.
Right.
And Milia, like I mentioned in in the Milia lesson, she can set up situations where she can oops win by spending resources, and then those sort of feed into her engine.
So
So
kind of a similar vortex effect to what Juno's got going on.
yeah, where
Okay.
because like Juno's vortex is that she hits you, she keeps the strike going, she gets gauge, she then can spend cards later with that, and then spending cards gets the cards in your discard, and now those are your next resources like for the next wave of attacks.
Right.
When Juno is rolling, you Like, it really just can feel like you can't do anything. And then
Right.
sometimes you take a bunch of damage in the middle too, which is
And
annoying.
and Milia has that feeling too, but if she ever whiffs or if she fails to stun you, her engine kind of falls apart in a way that Juno's discard pile stuff just doesn't.
Yeah, she also has a much higher propensity of actually losing to slows and not like, "I didn't lose, but you taxed one of my good cards."
Right.
Like, Milia has answers to slows, but they're specifically, like, Septem and Swing Braid, and Septem has to be at close to the end of its range, and Swing Braid has to be below curve.
Right.
Unless she's spending gauge or spending cards and gauge to get
And
around
that's
it.
a commitment, right?
So yeah, Milius commits a lot harder, but again, kind of a low damage speedster. You choose how much you want to commit. You're kind of hard to play against. You don't have anywhere near the inevitability or sheer like BS factor, but also you're not a
Right.
season one design.
Right. She's throwing mix-ups all game.
Yeah.
Right.
Chip even more so. Like Chip is less committal. He has a better chance of dodging your stuff, but doesn't hit as hard and needs to throw a bunch down when he does want to do a fast spike. Like Chip can hit you with a fast spike by spending a bunch. Juno can accidentally hit you with a fast spike sometimes.
And then hit you with another fast spike next turn.
Well, probably not. Like she's needs to do a little bit of shenanigans for that because she can't get the before.
Oh, the speed, of course.
Yeah, she can't pull it. She can't double fast spike you.
Right. She can just double ignore guard you with a fast option, which is a lot like a spike.
Yeah, I mean she can get struck into, trade, boost speed, and then fast spike you for your trouble,
Right.
which is still really good.
Which is still very, very, very good.
She can absolutely do that,
Right.
but she can't easily recur Sonic Comet and fast spike you and then fast spike you again.
Right.
And she notably does not have any ignore armor in her kit outside of Spike, which is a big deal.
Okay, so yeah, Spike is kind of carrying that burden alone. Okay.
Yeah, just like with Chip. It just Chip spends 2 cards and 2 gauge and pretends the opponent has plus 3 to 6 power, even though they don't.
Even though they don't,
And
right.
unless they have a stun immune card somewhere hiding. And she just occasionally remembers that Sonic Comet is in her discard, and the strike is going to end at 2 to 3. That's a much lower burden of entry.
So even the characters who are similar to Juno are not going to hit those same power highs, hopefully for the health of the game. But those are some folks, if you're a fan of them and you are going back to some legacy tournament or you just want to try out a season 1 character and beat up your friends, if you like those characters, you might like Juno.
Yeah, to super quickly summarize, Chip, Milia, Platinum, maybe Shovel and Shields, Chun-Li, uh, Zolt with the classic Zolt warnings,
Yep.
Shovel Knight with again the classic Shovel Knight warnings, promo Knight that is. So again, Shovel and Shield is kind of that defensive mix-up rangey weirdness character that does share a little bit of DNA.
Yep.
They're more committal though.
Everyone is more committal.
Zolt has an argument. I think it's wrong. I think Zujo is less committal than Zolt, but Zolt does have an argument.
And again, Zolt warnings. There's a reason that you had to give those Zolt warnings because Zolt is also quite unfun to play against for that same reason.
Yeah, and is Zolt's non-committalness is specifically why he is a problem, and Juno is probably even more extreme.
Right. All right. Andarel, anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up here?
No, I think that's it. Hopefully, these are the 2 boss characters at this point. I think hopefully it's clear, why these are boss characters. One shout out that I do want to give to the Exceed customs community who have a wide variety of random nonsense characters they like testing into Alice and Juno sometimes.
Yep.
There's a reason that if you do want to play against them, you might find something fun there.
Yep. The boss character meta, the Uber's Exceed meta, essentially for you Pokemon fans out there, is a vibrant and thriving place.
Yeah, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not.
Sure. True. I mean, that's also true of Pokemon.
But right now there is a very real, Carmine, Juno, Alice triangle that I don't know if it's actually a triangle. They're just all 3 of them are really silly. I don't know if the community has settled on a power ranking between the 3 or a matchup spread between the 3.
I can't think of too many things that the Exceed community has settled on, Andarel.
That's fair.
Yeah, we're a contentious bunch.
Look, this character got banned in, let's see, when did Juno get banned? 2018, 17? 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033, 2034, 2035, 2036, 2037, 2038, 2039, 2040, 2041, 2042, 2043, 2044, 2045, 2046, 2047, 2048, 2049, 2050, 2051, 2052, 2053, 2054, 2055, 2056, 2057, 2058, 2059, 2060, 2061, 2062, 2063, 2064, 2065, 2066, 2067, 2068, 2069, 2070, 2071, 2072, 2073, 2074, 2075, 2076, 2077, 2078, 2079, 2080, 2081, 2082, 2083, 2084, 2085, 2086, 2087, 2088, 2089, 2090, 2091, 2092, 2093, 2094, 2095, 2096, 2097, 2098, 2099, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, Juno got banned in fall 2018, which means that she survived about a year and a half in the tournament rotation, maybe a little bit more.
Yep.
And there is still discourse about the tier below the Melian, Zoe, Lily, Ulrich
Right.
tier.
Right.
And I think people have settled on that being the next tier down, those four characters, and like they're all pretty silly. But and they'd probably be banned if they were to be back in tournament rotation at this point. But like that discussion is perhaps ongoing.
And again, exceed community unlikely to settle on things anytime soon, may continue to be ongoing for the foreseeable future.
Yep. So yeah, it's pretty healthy. Nowadays we all just talk about what is it, Chip Bang Hakumen, I think are the talk of the town. Occasionally Ilya. I feel like those are
Yeah,
the
I,
modern
I
Exceed discourse.
I think it depends on who you ask, and that's sort of the point that the capital D discourse is ever evolving.
This is true. But
Yep,
we can all agree that Juno is dumb. So
Juno's dumb, and now that you know how to use her, you can go be dumb at your friends with her.
yep.
Well,
They
Anderl,
too can appreciate Electric Slide.
yes, just as we've learned too. Well, Anderl, thank you so much. This was great. I really appreciate your time and your expertise as always.
Yep, no
Um,
problem. Thanks for having me.
yeah, it's always a blast talking to you. Folks at home, hope you learned something. I hope you go beat up people with Juno now. Thank you for watching. I will see you all for the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Have a good one.